Alrighty. Got another debate review today. We are going to watch this debate between Andrew Wilson and Miss Kenzy, which looks like it goes for 7 hours. And props to both of these guys for actually being able to sit down for this long and hash out disagreements, because that's a lot. Like, man, 2 hour long debate is a lot of energy. I cannot believe they sat this long. Anyway, so obviously probably won't make it through all of this. Hopefully I can get at least an hour or two, and I'll probably just come back to where I left off next time. Also, probably going to be trying to talk to Space Apache again today. Last week, we had some technical difficulties. That's all right. This is kind of new to me, so bear with me as I figure it all out. But, yeah, if he's available, we're going to talk just about sort of his honor system rather than he's an amoral person. He goes by an honor system instead, and we'll probably just get into a bunch of different things from there. Anyway, yeah, let's get this debate going.
Okay.
Yeah.
My name is Miss Kenzy. I'm a TikTok feminist Marxist debater. My opening statement is essentially a feminist and Marxist critique on certain oppressive systems that we see not only globally but specifically in the United States, how they negatively affect women, relationships, society as a whole, and the philosophy into which how we should organize as a society into what our ultimate goal is.
Okay. Andrew, what about you?
Yeah, so that was a really quick opening statement.
Do you want more time or
No.
or anything else? Okay,
No,
go ahead, Andrew.
I'm ready to discuss stuff.
All right. Well, my name is Andrew Wilson.
Power
and,
move.
You could call me a Christian populist. You might refer to that as like Christian nationalist, maybe, though I do prefer the term populist. My overall
I feel like that's
viewpoint
changed.
is based around objective morality, things like this, things that we're not really on topic, I guess, for the purpose of this debate. I'm against Marxism, definitely against feminism, against all waves of feminism. So I'm not one of these people who thought second wave, third wave, fourth wave, or perhaps we're in fifth wave now. It's not decided. I don't think any of them are good. And the reason that I don't, I'll incorporate in my arguments a mixture of force doctrine, the understanding of the dynamics between men and women, the historical perspective. I have a criticism against yours because you're basing your worldview on standpoint theory, essentially, and I'm going to critique that as well. So overall, that's kind of what my worldview
By the way, standpoint theory is very much a later development of Marxism, mostly done by feminist Marxists. So it makes sense that he's bringing it up here. But I just want to point out that it's not really fundamental to Marxism itself. Although Marx talked about how the sort of oppressed or whatever have a privileged standpoint of view because they see things that the bourgeoisie doesn't or whatever else. Standpoint theory doesn't come until much later, and it's not actually necessary to hold standpoint theory to be a Marxist. And it's also like you can hold standpoint theory without being a Marxist. Like for me as a progressive who somewhat adopts some Marxist principles, but I'm definitely not a Marxist, I do like the idea of standpoint theory in the sense that, yes, every single one of us brings a different perspective to the table. If you look at it like a business, you don't want every single person coming to the ELT meeting, the elite leadership meeting, with the same exact perspective, because then they might just simply agree on what to do rather than kind of have some discourse, have some dialogue and some debate essentially about their different perspectives and how to solve the problem. The different perspectives add to the dialogue, and it allows you to more likely come up with the better solution than if it was just one single perspective.
If you wanted to dive in a little deeper, into that, I would say right-wing conservative. From your perspective, likely bordering on authoritarianism. So
Wait,
I am
from
definitely
her
here to oppress
perspective?
your views.
Or
Definitely here.
what do you mean from her perspective? You're either borderline authoritarian or you're not, right? Like, that's not really a perspective thing. We have a certain definition for what authoritarianism means. So that kind of seems weak to not just take the stance that I am, borderline authoritarian, not just from your perspective, just in general. Like, just stand on it. If you're gonna be authoritarian, then just take it.
Here to oppress your views.
Cruel and unfair treatment, huh?
That's right. Definitely here to oppress your views. So that's kind of my worldview. So with that, I'm actually happy to just kind of dive right into the debate.
I think one thing we were going to do first before we get into the open portion of the conversation was just defining a few terms and clearing those up. So because we are discussing feminism, I think just let's jumping off point here, I guess define what that is. Kenzy, do you have a definition for what feminism is?
Yeah, the movement to end sexist oppression and sexism.
Okay. All right. And how would you define sexism?
Biases towards one specific gender or sex.
Okay, gotcha. And then you also mentioned the term oppression.
Mm-hmm.
How do you define oppression?
Cruel and unfair treatment.
Okay, got it. Andrew, do you agree with these definitions, or would you like to give your own?
Yeah, so to me, when I say feminism, I mean a movement towards egalitarianism, which is trying to dismantle patriarchal systems.
Okay.
So that's what I'm referencing when I say that. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Sure.
Okay, so we can kind of agree then to that.
Can you please just hear me out? No, all work management platforms are the same.
I still need to get YouTube Premium, guys.
Definition
My
of
bad on
feminism
the
again.
ads today, but
oppression.
again, just bear with me if you would.
Would you just consider that basic power dynamics?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, cruel or unfair treatment can be through laws, can be through certain means of production.
What view are you viewing for the accounting of things like cruelty, like utilitarian or something like that?
I mean, I don't like to subscribe necessarily to one position. It depends, but
Pluralist.
utilitarian and
Let's go. She's a pluralist and she doesn't even know it. Pluralism for the win in every aspect: politics, morality, religion, spirituality, society, culture, right? Because pretending like we have the one universal absolute answer just stifles human progression on seeking knowledge, right? We should just adopt the best of the best from every system. Pluralism all the way, baby.
and deontological positions.
You have a mixture of them?
Yeah,
Okay. So like maybe threshold.
sure. Mhm.
Okay, like threshold deontology, something like that?
Mhm.
Okay,
I mean, it would depend on the topic.
gotcha. Okay, so cruel and unusual punishment. All right, I think we got a lot of the semantic. If you don't mind, if we have to stop from time to time to clear up semantics.
No,
One thing
I'm
I
fine.
really hate is equivocation, the idea that we speak past each other because we're talking about two different things.
Sure.
So
No, I think it's important to communicate the concept you're trying to convey.
Yeah. So kind of to start with, I guess I can kind of open up to get this thing moving.
Yeah, go for
So I want to start with the idea of how feminism and Marxism aren't contrary to each other. So I've read a lot of Marxist feminist literature, especially from Dubois, and they do actually seem to be a contradiction. So through first wave feminism to modernity, feminism has single-handedly put more women in the hands of rich industrialists than any other single movement which has ever existed. Rich capitalist industrialists are now basically in charge of women. Women are part of the market workforce now. They never were. As part of the market workforce, they have now accrued almost as much debt in 100 years as men, which is incredible. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. There's only a few. One of the big ones is student loans, but I mean, they're almost on point with everything else. There's very, very few market indicators where they hold significantly less debt than men do.
From my understanding, the only place where women do hold more debt is student loans. Men hold more in
That's true.
credit cards and
It's true. Well, credit cards, it could be that we don't know because we get it from the
Sure,
credit
yeah,
card reporting
households,
agency,
yeah.
but it's like a 2% margin. So maybe they hold less, maybe they hold, I'm not sure, but it's not significant. Like none of these thresholds I look at look very significant to me. So what I'm trying to figure out is Marxism, and maybe we can clear up the semantic here too, but Marxism is looking for a stateless society where
That's the angle, yeah.
where capitalism is gone, right?
Uh-huh.
So if capitalism is gone, how is feeding millions upon millions of women to the capitalist machine via feminism a good idea for Marxism? It makes no sense to me.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about
So, saying end goal is a stateless society also, it gets a bit complicated because there's just so many branches of all this stuff. But a stateless society would be sort of assuming a anarchist communist stance, right? There are clearly examples of Marxism that do not see the goal as a stateless society, but actually an authoritarian state which has economic controls, authoritarian economic controls. So maybe you could say ultimately the goal, the utopia that may never be achieved, is some stateless society where every worker is like controlling the means of their production or something else. But it's just not true that all forms of Marxism are assuming that goal, because some of them are very much assuming a authoritarian state nationalist society, kind of like what Andrew would push for on the opposite side, like a authoritarian sort of Christian capitalist society.
about first wave feminism, I don't like to necessarily define feminism based on its wave, because I think it ignores certain sects within feminism that are outside of that, as well as kind of puts it in a Western purview. But I will say, obviously,
Good
there
answer.
are different modes of feminism that we've seen in place throughout history, and I would just say this was liberal feminism, which obviously is towards the movement of upward mobility within capitalism.
Yeah, but why would you support that?
I wouldn't. I
Well,
would be
then-
against liberal
then
feminism.
how are you a feminist? Well, what kind of feminist are you?
Marxist intersectional feminist.
Okay, yeah, Marxist intersectional, but
Right.
you did rely on first wave, second wave, third wave, fourth wave feminism.
Yeah, so there is progression, obviously, over time. I'm sure you have, I know I've heard you say that with your Christian populism, your plan is 300 years. So obviously there's going to be different steps that you take over time. I think when it comes to, if we're going to talk about liberal feminism and women entering the market when it comes to economic work, is that one of the ways we see that women have faced oppression or marginalization or subjugation, whatever term you want to use, is obviously patriarchy's construction of dependency on men. So,
But they were more liberated. So men held the debt, not women. So I would argue
I mean,
immediately.
sorry, go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah, no problem. I would argue immediately that because women now hold so much debt, they're less liberated than they ever have been, at least in this nation. So I would point you to things like before they had the right to vote, the 19th Amendment, they were able to pass the 18th Amendment. That was literally due to the women's temperance movement. And they did not have the right to vote at that time, but they had so much moral political power that they were able to pass that. So they definitely had political power and they had no debt. I don't see how this is
Well, I
more
don't think a lot of
liberating.
people had debt during that time.
Yeah, men had a lot of debt. Men, I mean, they
Like
had all
individual
the debt.
debt?
They had all the debt. All of it. Like
Sure, but
1
like-
to 2% maybe for women.
Well,
Sure.
they had all of it, but, right, the debt back then was not near the levels it is now, because now we're in late stage capitalism. That was an early capitalist society in which the debt wasn't as high, the inflation wasn't as high, the debt ceiling wasn't as high. So, yeah, maybe they had all the debt. However, there just wasn't near as much debt in general to be had. So I think that's kind of what she's getting at.
Sure. So, I mean, if we're talking about, like, do I think debt is a good thing? No, that would be a critique against capitalism. The critique that with feminism in that specific instance that you've given is that the only way to get access to the material goods of life is obviously through money. And so when women are able to participate in the market, then they are dependent on men in order to get housing, to get food, to get shelter, so on and so forth. Or, they're paid very low wages. And so I think expanding that market then creates more individual opportunities to where you don't have to get married, to where you can have more autonomy in your choice.
Yeah, but this is really this is a very odd position that I don't think stacks up very well. So if the idea is women need to be able to gain more materialism, that is in conflict with Marxism, which is
I
saying
agree. I'm
that
saying
women...
that's under capitalism.
Yeah, but we live in capitalism.
Sure.
And we did then.
I understand that.
So the thing is like, it seems very contradictory to me to say, well, okay, access to materialism.
Hold on. Sorry. What's going on? Okay, I apologize.
Yeah, no problem.
We have a new.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So it's just really bizarre to me when you say women need to be able to access materialism in order to be less oppressed, when now women they have. By the way, I mean their student loan debt alone is insane. They're now under the yoke of capitalism more significantly than they ever have been because of this accruement of debt. So it seems like you're just feeding them into the system while calling it liberation, when rich industrialists owned them then and own them now.
So, I mean, it's a more intersectional look at that. Like,
They own everybody is the point, right? So you're like, I think Andrew's just conflating the anti-capitalist part with the feminist part. So obviously the goal for a Marxist feminist is to both transcend capitalism and transcend patriarchy. However, if capitalism cannot be transcended, well, then they can start in one area. They can say, well, we can still exist in this capitalist, liberal, neoliberal society, but at least we can push for women's rights and advocacy in this system. At least we're tackling one part of the agenda. So it's not a contradiction to wake up and be like, hey, I don't like capitalism. I don't like patriarchy. One of these things I can deal with currently. One of these things I don't think I can deal with. I don't think I can take on capitalism, but I can advocate for myself as a woman in a capitalist society, so we can start there, right? In no way is that a contradiction just because you're choosing one place to start and not taking them both on at once.
I do agree with you that capitalism in itself and like the concept of debt is oppressive. So yes, you are correct when you say that assessment. But if we're looking at the intersection, what's the alternative under capitalism for women to be dependent on access to the basic materials?
That seems far and away to me to be a way better system if you wanted to actually institute Marxism. So I'll explain why. If you were to use the accelerationist argument, which it sounds like you're trying to do, move into accelerationism, we would just have fascism. Like that's what we usually end up with.
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
Right-wing authoritarianism.
Well, I know what you mean by fascism. Can you repeat your point, though?
Yeah. So if the idea is women need to be moved into the rich industrialist market for some reason because it's more liberating for them to have more materialism, which it seems to be completely the...
He's missing such a huge point here, right? What is liberating for this is that women do not have to be financially dependent on a man to exist in the society, right? That is the liberating aspect, right? Because in the society that Andrew wants, women will literally be financially tied to a man. And if they are sort of getting abused, if they are running into trouble with this man or whatever else, they literally can't leave because they're tied financially to them. There's no way out. So I don't understand why he's missing this point that, like, yes, we have to exist in capitalism still as it stands, but women can work for themselves, make their own money, such that they don't have to just depend on a man for their entire livelihood, right? Because, like, sometimes people are shitty. Like, I wouldn't want a man to have to be financially tied down to a woman either. Like, that puts so much power in that person's court to say, hey, I have all of the finances, access to your food, your shelter, your water, everything else. Like, I control all of that. How can you not see how that is maybe a problem for people who want to be independently gaining these things?
The opposite,
Or
because
more opportunity.
for what though? To ingratiate more materialism.
No, I would even just say like the standard means of living.
Materialism.
I don't know, like,
Well,
we need housing, right? Is that materialism?
Yeah, well, yeah, it is.
Okay.
Like, depending on the size of the house, and I mean, so when you say housing, what does that encompass? Like a commie block, like a stone commie block, where it's like little
I think
tiny.
we can agree like on what basic necessities humans need in order to function within society, and I would say housing would be definitely a
Sure,
core
but how
tenet.
big?
I think it would depend, obviously, based on need.
Yeah, right. So
Utility.
if it's moving off of need, right? I would say that people need very little space,
Okay.
right?
Sure.
So if this is the case, though, introducing women into the capitalist market, right, where now rich industrialists own their labor, which they do, in order to
Right.
give them the right to vote about stuff that's kind of meaningless ultimately towards themselves. What was the point of that for Marxism? It's totally counterintuitive.
Well, I'm not saying it's a movement towards Marxism. I'm saying that that's obviously like a liberal feminist
Thank
movement,
you.
which is upward mobility within capitalism so that you can have access to.
So you don't support
basic-
feminism?
I don't support liberal feminism.
But that's the only type of feminism we've had here.
In terms of certain movements, sure. I guess it would depend on how you classify certain movements. But when we're talking about like capitalist critique, those who think that women would find liberation having the same access to capitalist opportunities as men is a liberal feminist idea.
But well, I don't understand then. So do you support Western feminism or not?
Great. The new GoDaddy Arrow has AI marketing tools to help small.
I don't, if you want to label it as that Western feminism.
Like, well, okay, so the only feminism that I can point to is either the feminism here, or we can talk about communist feminism, but that was liberalized as well.
I disagree. I think we can see, like, when the Black Panthers in the 60s and 70s, that's where womanism was born out of, which is also Marxist theory.
Yeah, sure, but it was also part of a feminist movement.
Right.
The
so-
sexual liberation was a big part of what was going on in the 60s with Black Panther and female liberation, too. So
But there's this idea, like, because also native indigenous peoples have their own form of feminism, right? And when we say the West, like, you know, technically Native Americans are in the West, but that's not the Western world. That's not the liberal Enlightenment, like, secular nation states. So saying that non-Western feminism is so it refers to, like she mentioned, Black feminism sometimes, though that is intersectional to liberal feminism as well. But native feminism, before colonization, there were some native tribes which were matrilineal. They weren't matriarchies. They were just sort of more egalitarian in the sense that women had a voice in the politics and the decisions and everything like that. It wasn't a strict patriarchy. So there are versions of non-liberal, non-Western feminism that we can point to.
I'm just curious, though. First wave feminism, you agree, essentially fed all women into this massive capitalist machine, whereas they did not have to participate in it before.
Again, like, I think that's a really exclusionary idea of first wave feminism, because there were also, like, feminists who were abolitionists. There were also feminists who were poor, who wanted more rights for the working class, and those were kind of ignored. So I think if you want to label first wave feminism as essentially the suffragette movement, and the means to enter capitalist, I don't think that's all encompassing of feminism.
First wave feminism is definitely responsible for millions upon millions upon millions of women entering into the workforce under rich capitalist industrialists, single-handedly responsible for that.
Okay.
What else would it be that would be responsible for that? Other
Well,
than
I think
feminism?
that's obviously what's at the forefront.
Yeah.
But there are other sects of feminism that we're dealing with abolition. We're dealing with
they
like
never had any political power.
okay.
So,
I mean, we
like-
had the 1912 Lawrence textile strike, which was about working conditions.
Yeah, but feminists have always moved towards working. But this is the problem again. Working conditions for what? To capitalism? To the working capitalist plants?
I guess I'm not sure, like what.
Yeah, like one of the ideas of Marxism and socialism is this idea of reformation, right? Not all of them are just these like, you must burn down the system and overthrow capitalism, though a lot of them are. So yeah, sort of this idea of let's try to exist in this capitalist system and promote workers' rights, unions, stuff like this, working conditions, material conditions for workers, right? This is in no way a contradiction to say, hey, we exist in a capitalist society. How can we make the working conditions better for the working class? Because we can't seem to overthrow the system, right? We have to exist here. How can we make the conditions better? That's not a contradiction to sort of embrace capitalism and try to make it better for the laborers and the working class.
What your overarching question
My
is.
overarching point is, why would you support if you don't support first wave feminism, because it fed millions upon millions of women into the pocket in the pocket of rich industrialists, which it did, and you agree it did, and the second wave did, and the third wave, and now even the fourth wave. None of these feminist waves are anti-capitalist.
No, I agree.
So you don't support any of that, though, right?
If we're going to have a critique of capitalism, I think we can have ways that we can see how
not-
women can be more
I'm not
liberated.
critiquing capitalism. I'm
Okay.
critiquing the view of feminism.
Right, but obviously if we're going to talk about capitalism, that those are intertwined. So if we're not going to abolish the system, how can women participate within capitalism that would give them opportunity or more liberation? I
Exactly.
agree.
It's just look at it this way. If you take the feminist aspect out of it, right? This is like telling just a man Marxist or socialist that it doesn't make sense that you want to make unions. Now here you are existing in a capitalist system by just making a union, but yet you're still working for these CEOs and corporations. Like the whole point is that they're striving towards unions and workers' rights within the capitalist system because they understand they can't just overthrow it. So in no way does this take away from feminism just because we're saying, hey, there's this capitalist system. Women were never able to work in it. Let's start by letting women work in the system equal to men, right? So that they're not financially dependent upon men. And then from there, we can continuously strive towards more workers' rights, maybe unions, whatever else. It's just a way to start and start progressing. This is no contradiction.
With you,
I would
liberation
argue-
is not possible under capitalism.
Well, I would argue then that if this is the case, you're looking for more liberation, I would say that they're more liberated when they can't accrue debt. And they couldn't accrue debt. Only the man could accrue debt. And only the man
well,
who was
if you
married
hold
could
that
accrue
philosophy,
debt.
then are men oppressed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, men are very oppressed.
Okay, then I guess we don't disagree.
So I gotta ask. I wouldn't say for the same reasons you would, but the question becomes: is it the case that you think that women are more or less oppressed by capitalism now than they were when they were dependent on their husbands?
Well, obviously, capitalism has taken different form. So it would depend on essentially what metric we're evaluating. They have more access to education, which I would see would be less oppressive. Obviously, the stressors of
More
wealth.
oppressive.
Education's oppressive?
Yeah, it's way more oppressive to women.
To be educated?
What's the only type of debt women have that outnumbers men?
Again, that's just because
What's
of
hang
capitalism.
on? Just answer the question. What's
It's
the only
student
type?
loans.
It's student
We already
loans.
agreed.
Yeah,
So
this is the thing. He's just simply critiquing capitalism for her, right? So this in no way critiques feminism. It's critiquing capitalism, right? Maybe we shouldn't have to accumulate debt to go to school. Maybe we should just be able to go to school because our country is very wealthy and could afford to send people to school. So him saying that oh, women are liberated because they get to go to school, but that actually means they're oppressed because they accumulate more debt. Yeah, thanks, Andrew. You're admitting that capitalism is kind of sucking right now. Maybe we shouldn't have to accumulate all this debt just to go get an education. That's kind of the point. So you're not you're critiquing capitalism for her right now.
So the idea of the education, right, which is mostly it's not like most of these are STEM degrees. They're not.
I mean, if education were free, would you say that they're being oppressed?
Education is free up until college age.
I know. I'm just asking, are we talking about the idea of education itself or the fact that it's so expensive?
No, we're talking about liberation from oppression. And so what I'm arguing to you
correct.
is that...
So when you say education is oppressive, is that because under capitalism of the cost that obviously debt is burdensome, or just a woman being educated is oppressive?
No, I would say that the accruement of student debt, mostly being in the hands of women, has done more to oppress them than if they had not gone to college in the first place. Then if that had been barred
but
from
that's
them...
not my question.
What? Okay, but what's your question then?
My question is, you're not saying education is oppressive. You're saying either going into debt or the society making a profit off education obviously puts burdens on the person who's taking loans out.
Yes.
We don't disagree with that.
Yes.
I don't disagree.
But why are we selecting for that then?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, you say that women need to be educated. Institutions are going to require capital in order to educate. So
right. So if again we're going to, education has definitely benefited women in terms of having the equal access to
capitalism.
To certain aspects of society that would give them more opportunity and more identity.
It has literally led them to being pawns in capitalism.
Yeah, just like men.
Yeah. So the thing is
I mean,
like,
if you think
how is that? But how is that less less oppressive? It's way more oppressive. So this is what I don't get.
I would say
like,
choice and individuality.
Like,
so if we're talking about certain social ideas.
Yeah, let's walk through it logically,
Okay.
right? So we start with women can accrue no debt. Only their husbands can accrue debt. That's it. Only the husbands were able to accrue debt.
But then they're uneducated, correct?
No, they could still be educated.
How?
They would go to school.
Where?
Well, they had public school was available. By the way, women have always done better in public school. And then college was also available to them. Most of your first wave feminist leaders went to school. They went to college.
Right, but college was also free then.
No, it wasn't free.
Yeah, it was.
Where?
In the United States.
Where?
Like what specific college? I think Berkeley was free up until the 60s.
Okay. So when you're talking about college fees, it's important to understand that if it is the case that you want everybody to do a thing, you're going to have a lot of that thing for them to be able to do it. So when you're talking about education specifically, it used to be about rewarding the best and brightest. It is not about rewarding the best and brightest now. There's lots and lots and lots of people who go and get a college degree, and it's the equivalent of like a 10th grade education, 9th grade education. Right?
Okay.
So if that's the case, right, all we're doing really is just lowering the standard anyway. Right? Lowering the standard and then telling women that they need to go and use their birthing years in college, which makes no sense to me. It's very silly. You take the reproductive years, you say go spend the reproductive years in school so that you can be part of this capitalist machine. That's very strange to me that that's your advocation.
So he's bringing up reproductive years. Let's see. Reproductive years. Women. So, to be the most charitable, right, which women can have children up into their mid-40s, sometimes late 40s. Obviously, it gets more and more dangerous to do, but that is to be the most charitable, right? So maybe around 35 is when it starts going downhill a little bit. So sending a woman to college until they're 24, 25, that still leaves 10 plus years to have children. So I don't understand what the problem is here. 10 years is plenty of time to have, 3 to 4. You can still have plenty of children then. So I don't understand this critique at all.
Marxist feminists.
Oh, yeah.
Big ideas
Let's
don't
bring
come
it back.
easy.
I mean, obviously, if we're talking about the ideal situation, then women would have access to education without having
By
to
the
go.
way, when it comes to the reproductive years, this is a little bit weird, right? But as soon as a girl has gone through puberty, they are very fertile, right? Is like, would Andrew say that, oh, well, we should stop sending 15-year-olds to public school and high school now because that's their fertile years, their best time to have a kid? That sounds a bit more strange when you put it that way, doesn't it? So, yeah, in no way does schooling take away from someone's ability to have kids. Women can still go to school with having kids. Like, plenty of them do it. So this just doesn't hold at all.
Go into debt.
That's not, well, okay. How?
What do you mean how?
Yeah, how? So we should pay for everybody's college.
Well, obviously, if we're going to live under a capitalist society, like this, at the center of that is going to be profit. So I
no.
just think that's an ineffective way to
So-
organize society, because then it's obviously putting profit over people.
So now this is circular now. So we start with capitalism's bad. Liberate women so they can participate in capitalism. Capitalism's bad. Liberate women so that they can become part of the capitalist
Well,
machine.
no. So if we're going to talk about how women can have more opportunity and individuality over in capitalism, that's one argument. And then talking about how women can be fully liberated from the constraints of capitalism is a different argument.
Well, okay, but let's talk. If you want to dice them up, I'm willing to like dice arguments up as small as you want to make them, or as large as you want to make them. So we can go as granular
Well,
as you
I'm
want.
just saying it's two different lanes,
Or we
and it
can
seems
go-
you can be combining it as one.
Okay, but what's the goal of Marxism? Stateless society, right?
Yeah.
How is I still don't understand how throwing women into
Again,
the big
that's-
capitalist machine.
This is somewhere where I disagree with both of them, right? Like, that is the goal for some Marxists, especially anarchists, but there are plenty other Marxists, tankies in fact, who want an authoritarian nation state. So to say the goal of Marxism is a stateless society, it gets tricky because there are a lot of different interpretations of Marx's work and everything else, but there's also just plenty of socialists who take Marx's words to mean like, well, we just need to continue making the working conditions and the material conditions better in the society that we're existing in, right? So it's not simply that every one of these Marxists just think that the end goal is a stateless society. I don't know, maybe a Marxist would disagree with me, and if any of them are listening, then they can come talk to me, because I'm not strictly a Marxist, like I said earlier. I'm more of just like a progressive. But I do know that Marxism is just, it's multifaceted. There's a lot of different levels to it. There's tanky communists, right? There's socialists. There's market socialists. Like, it's just putting it in one single box like that doesn't really make sense. But to be fair, I guess if she agrees with it, then it's fruitful for their debate, because her version of Marxist maybe does view
as a form of
stateless
liberation
society, right? But
helps get us to that.
It doesn't.
Then why would you? I still am confused why you support those things.
I mean, I don't support necessarily like what you're specifically saying. If I had my like, how do we transition from capitalism to communism, is a different argument than how can women suffer less oppression under capitalism.
Yeah, but if you don't agree with those things, and first wave feminism was about liberation to participate in capitalism, then you don't support first wave feminism.
oh, you literally just ignored her entire point, right? She's separating out the capitalist critique from the like patriarchy critique. She's saying, obviously, as a anti-capitalist, she's saying that I don't like that men or women have to accumulate debt and be laborers to CEOs and whatnot, right? This has nothing to do with the feminist thing. This is just the critique of capitalism. However, she has understood that in this capitalist society, they weren't able to overthrow it. So what can we do to better women's conditions? Well, we can get them to at least participate in the society the same way the men do, right? This is not contradictory. I don't know why she literally just explained that to him, and it's like he didn't even hear the point.
I don't like classifying feminism in terms of those waves because it just reduces it down to a singular idea where there are multiple sets of ideas. So yes, if you want me to say I don't agree, I don't agree.
Okay, well, what are the prominent ideas then?
Sure. Yeah.
The prominent ideas were definitely...
I don't agree.
Yeah. So
if
then,
that's what you want me to say.
So then I don't know that you're a feminist at all, just a Marxist.
Well, I mean, have you heard of TERFs?
Yeah.
Would you say that's a form of feminism?
It's a very traditional form of feminism.
Yeah, I'm not a TERF, so does that mean I'm not a feminist? I feel this is like no true Scotsman fallacy.
No.
Nice.
I have to say, there are prominent sects of feminism, right?
Yeah, you have radical feminism, liberal feminism, intersectional, Marxist.
Yeah.
So I'm saying
But
there
all
are
of them are
certain-
basing it around the liberation of women. Just the different ideas around
Correct,
the basis
just
of
like
the liberation of women.
there's capitalism,
Yeah.
which I'm sure we could define and say there's different
first-wave
functions of capitalism.
Yeah, so first wave feminism definitely wanted to liberate women so that they could have their own assets and go to work.
Correct.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
I mean, go to work, like women have always worked, especially poor and women of color. So I think like going to work is kind of maybe like a white-centered notion. I will acknowledge that I think in the early 1900s we had about 20% of women in the workforce,
So
and then by like
same
1950 I think it was close to 50.
Especially you had the post-World War II people who were staying in the workforce.
Sure, exactly.
But the thing
it
is,
depends on who you're counting
again,
as well.
Definitely first wave feminism was responsible for this. So the thing is I guess when you're talking about Marxist feminism specifically, you would have to kind of hate first wave feminism because it did
In
more...
a lot of notions I do, because I do think it ignored the material conditions of poor women, women of color. So yeah, I don't disagree.
Okay.
Just I'm sure you support capitalism, right? Do you like social democracy?
well, I'm not sure that that's contingent on capitalism.
That is a capitalist mode, just like a laissez-faire free market would be. There's different ways that capitalism can be structured, and you can agree.
Right. And it's like saying, so the capitalism in this country was quite literally built off of slave labor when we first founded it, right? So that in no way, back at Andrew, she could just say, well, since you support capitalism as it stands now, that must mean you supported slavery when this country was first founded, because our version of capitalism was built upon the backs of slaves. So, right, it's one of the genetic fallacies. He should be aware of this. Just because there is a wave in the past that now feminism is built upon doesn't mean that we just agree with every portion of the past version of feminism. That's the genetic fallacy, and he should be able to see this. He's smarter than that.
Agree with one.
Yeah, but capitalism is an economic system. It's not as much of a political theory as Marxism.
I'm just showing how an idea can have different theory behind it.
Yeah, I'm not disputing that. I'm talking about the prominence of the ideas themselves.
Sure, I guess if I must not have understood. No,
Yeah.
I don't agree with some of the modes that liberal feminism or first wave feminism, as you've called it, have used.
So then wouldn't you agree with me then that it actually would have been more liberating for women to not have participated in first wave feminism but instead relied on their husbands? Wouldn't that have actually been more liberating than sacrificing them to the sacrificial lamb of capitalism?
Which is worse? I don't know.
So the point, I don't know what she's going to say, but the point of that liberation, again, was that women were tied down to a man for their well-being and financial stability, for them to eat food, for them to have a shelter, for them to have water, whatever else. They had to depend completely upon a man, right? So the women there were like, hey, this system for us is not cool because sometimes our men are not dependable. Sometimes they're abusive. Sometimes we need to leave. But how can I leave if I'm financially tied to this person? So that's how it's liberating, because it's giving them more independence to exist within this system. We can still not like the system. That's fine. We still don't like the system, but they're gaining more dependence independence within the system they don't like. It's not really that hard.
There's just so many metrics that you can evaluate.
Why did we get so much quieter?
When
Well,
it
this
comes
is the
to
metric we're evaluating.
Hold on.
So the metric
That's
we're
just my
evaluating is,
headphone.
my argument is, if women are dependent on their husbands and accrue no debt,
There we
only
go.
the husband can accrue debt, but women can still own assets, which they could. And they can still own property, which they could, even if they were married.
Right, but you're
they
forcing
could.
a woman to link arms with a man. So if she's single, does she have access
As
to these
opposed
things?
to
If she's a
forcing her to
lesbian,
go to work.
does she have these things?
Yeah,
I think,
they still, yes, of course.
How would you have these things?
How would they not have them? They were able to own property even unmarried. That's
well-
always been the history of the United States.
Right, but obviously then you would need to be in the workforce, correct? Because you need to purchase it.
No, you wouldn't need to purchase it. Oftentimes, your father would give it to you.
Oh, so just through, again, like
Yeah.
generational wealth.
Yeah. Which, by the way, first wave feminism destroyed a lot of that too. A lot of cross generational wealth. But women could
Well-
own property.
Sure. I mean, I would say, like, why would I have to pick one?
Hyperfocus is the tool of 2025. But the problem with hyperfocus is that I would hyperfocus.
Because your choice is either you go to work, right? You either want equality or you don't want equality. So if the idea is I want equality, and that's what
I think it would be more beneficial for women not to be dependent on men and to have more
then to
liberty.
work within the capitalist system.
Yes, just
yes.
bite that. Well, okay.
Why?
Thank
because
you.
they would have more control, autonomy, and identity.
They don't seem to have more control over either of or any of those things. Example, the identity of woman now in modernity is in question, period.
What do you mean?
What is a woman?
Deep metal.
Oh, we're going there now.
Well, you just said women would have more identity. Because
Yeah,
and
identity
more
in
autonomy.
terms of
But
if you're going to be dependent on a husband, then your labor
Mm-hmm.
is predetermined for you. Your identity in terms of being a wife and mother is predetermined for you.
Yeah, but the beneficiaries of that is that your accruement of debt is also non-existent, and so you can never
It's
be a
not
slave
really
to
non-existent because your
capitalism.
husband has it as well. So I mean, there is still capitalistic threat.
You were not ever
and you don't
responsible
have-
for your husband's debt.
But you still suffer the outcomes if it doesn't work out, right?
Yeah, but you suffer the outcomes of that now under
right,
capitalism.
but you would have more control and autonomy, right?
You don't
know,
seem
it's
to
either
have-
like you're
I
the
don't
captain
see
of
how
your own
women
sinking
ha-
ship, or you're just kind of
I
a
don't-
passenger on the Titanic.
Like you use these words, these kind of buzzwords, right? You say they have more autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
How do women have more autonomy?
Self-determination through choice.
What choices? Which ones?
Essentially,
How about
they
being
want
able
to
to
experience
leave,
their life.
divorce somebody who's beating them? How about that? I know you want to take away no fault divorce, but yeah. How about just the ability to leave and be financially stable without a man? There's a choice right there that she just explained to you.
Life. Do they want to get married? Do they want to have children?
They had the option to do that before. They didn't have to get married. Most of the time, women who didn't get married stayed at home with their parents. By the way, right now, most women who don't get married, they often stay at home with their parents. Not a lot has changed in that department.
I mean, I haven't read any statistics that women who don't get married just stay home with their parents.
Yes, it's often the case that women who do
Is that
not
true
get
with men?
married stay at home with their parents. Yeah,
Because
it's often true with men too.
I think single
and it was
women
often true with men then.
home, I think single women home purchases are starting to outpace men.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it
so
is
it
often
seems that
the
they're
case.
getting their own. They're getting their own house. Not
Sometimes.
staying.
Financial
Sometimes, but you
stability,
gotta remember
independence.
now,
Sounds
children
like
staying
some
home with their
autonomy,
parents
Andrew.
longer than
Sure. So
ever.
obviously, like the conditions that comes to capitalism now is different than it was, in the 1900s.
Yeah, so I mean, the thing is that I don't see how women actually have any more of these things. I don't see how they have any more autonomy. I don't see how they have any more
She
actual
literally
choice.
just
It just seems
gave
like
you an
illusion of
example.
choice.
So I don't.
I would agree with you. There is some oppression within that choice, but I do think the choice is more.
Okay, and it's worth it to have this limited amount of autonomy in order to grind yourself in a capitalist system. Like if you were to ask the average woman, if you were to go back in time, hypothetically, and you were
What
to
time
sit down with first wave feminists, okay, who couldn't seem to get first wave feminism passed any other way than an amendment because women were voting it down all over the place. The question becomes, if you ask them, if we fast forwarded this to 100 years.
So I
just
wish
wanna
she
let
would
you know that
contest
your
this,
children will be
actually.
living it.
And this is something I need to look into because Andrew and Rachel say stuff like this all the time. But I'd like to actually see the numbers on this and how the polls were even conducted for like saying most women didn't want the right to vote or whatever else. I'm not saying they're wrong. Like they could very much well be right. I'm curious what these numbers are, how these polls were conducted, because, you know, I imagine they didn't actually get to every household, especially to the poorer households. I'm imagining they probably conducted a poll for middle class working man with stay-at-home wife. That's probably who they polled for this. Like white women who were raising kids at home were probably, being like, I don't really care about that. I'm happy at my home. But that's not the story for everybody at that time in America, right? There were a lot of women who were working already to help sustain the household because they were poor. They weren't middle class. They already had to work. So they probably wanted more of a say in the system that they have to work in, right? So, yeah, I'm just curious how these polls were actually conducted.
At home with you until they're 25. You will have access to college, but you'll have crushing debt, and chances are your marriage is going to fail. Chances are really good that your marriage is going to fail, over 50% perhaps, that your marriage is going to fail. But you'll have a little tiny bit more autonomy, but I won't even be able to exactly tell you how you have more of it. Do you think that they would go for that deal? Or if you said, hang on, or if you said to them, if you don't do this, your husbands will accrue all debt. You'll never have to worry about it again, and you can still make moral claims, and they'll be super effective, just like the temperance movement was, because now you're not political pawns.
I think you're kind of constructing the options in a way that would be beneficial to a specific narrative. I think I have cleared how you have autonomy. Like, would you want men to be dependent on women and have women be the predominant mode of production under capitalism?
I don't think it's possible.
But would you want that?
Well, I couldn't want a thing I don't think is possible.
Why?
Because it's not possible.
Well, why is it not possible?
It's not possible because women are not capable of doing the same types of things that men are capable of doing.
Such as?
Inside of society, enforcement.
Enforcement?
Mm-hmm.
So like police and...
No, military.
Military?
Mm-hmm. Military, policing,
I don't think
special
men
services.
I don't think men really are capable of that.
The men have gone and fought global wars time and time again and won.
Yeah, and what outcomes do they have?
They win the war.
They suffer severe PSD. They have a hard time integrating into society. That doesn't seem like a natural condition for men to be subjected to.
There can be symptoms of violence, but remember, not everybody gets PTSD, even combat veterans. A lot of them don't have PTSD. Some get PTSD.
Right.
But not only that, that's a coping mechanism. It's going to be individualistic. Men are definitely capable of extreme...
But it is an outcome of being exposed to extreme violence.
Only for some people.
I could say that about women.
Yeah, you can, but the problem when it comes down to enforcement is that women can't do enforcement.
What do you mean?
So I'll give you the easy hypothetical.
Okay.
If all men tomorrow decide that women in the United States are slaves, are women in the United States slaves?
So, first of all, he can't just make this sweeping claim of all women cannot do enforcement, because clearly some can, right? And I understand if you push him on that, he's just going to be like, well, this is on the aggregate, right? This is on the majority, average. Okay, but if that's the case, then stop presenting it as if it's all women. Just present it as, well, the majority of women can't do these tasks to the same degree that men can, right? Because you constantly present it as if it's an all or nothing. You don't present it as most or majority. And...
No.
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 Why wouldn't they be?
I think it would be
how could women stop it?
It would just depend essentially on access to resources.
Yeah, men have the access to all the resources because they made you slaves.
Also, this
Well,
hypothetical,
you're-
just like how he rejected her hypothetical, she should just reject this hypothetical to say all men, if all men decided tomorrow that all women are going to be slaves, then that would be the case, right? Well, I just don't think that's a possibility. All men are not going to do that. That's literally like there are feminist men. I, for one, would not join the cause to make all women slaves. Like, this is just an impossible hypothetical, so she shouldn't engage with it. There's no world in which tomorrow all men are going to say all women are slaves. No, there's going to be a ton of men who take up arms with the women and fucking fight you guys. Like, no, like you're never going to get all men to take all women for slaves. It's a stupid hypothetical. And just like she rejected her, or he rejected her hypothetical, she should do the same thing back. Just reject it. Why would we engage with something that's impossible?
Like, that's how women could, like, stop it.
Women couldn't
It would
stop
just be a fight over resources.
How come women can't stop it in Islamic nations then when they just go, okay, you're
Well,
all slaves?
obviously, in Islamic nations, they don't have access to specific resources.
Nobody has access to resources if men don't allow access to those resources. Nobody. Because men have a monopoly on force. That's feminist theory. Feminists understand, even Marxist feminists know this, that men have a monopoly on force. So, in other words, if men collectively...
Under patriarchy, I agree.
No, under any archy, they're going to need to have men as their monopoly on force. I'll give you an example. If tomorrow men decided to enslave all women would be enslaved. However, if tomorrow all women decided to enslave all men, they do not have the force doctrine and requisite necessary to do so. They
Okay.
could not do it.
Let
They
me
just couldn't do it.
Within
here's
any context.
Here's a hypothetical back to Andrew, which is just as silly as his. All women tomorrow could decide at the same time to secretly abort every single one of their pregnancies and kill all of their babies. All women could do that because, they could literally punch their stomach until they have a miscarriage. And if they all do it coordinated at the same time, without letting the men know, they could just literally genocide all of humanity because they sort of control the production of babies, right? And I know Andrew wants more babies. So, yeah, this hypothetical is silly, just like his hypothetical silly, that all men would never join his cause to enslave all women, and all women would probably not join the cause to miscarry all their babies. The hypotheticals are silly, and the point is, men and women work best in cooperation, right? So, and I think Andrew would probably agree to that to some extent, but he just wants the cooperation to be this like hierarchy of patriarchy, whereas feminists want the cooperation to be more egalitarian, that they can operate and cooperate with each other. The man can still lead and make decisions, right? And the women can make decisions too. The cooperation is the best way because we both have unique abilities and capabilities to add. Come up here and yap to me, Ramus. Let's go. Baited you to a comment, didn't I?
So if women had access to all the drones, if
Nope.
women had access to all the water supply,
repairs them
if
all?
women had access, sorry,
We
if
repair
women
them
had
all.
access to, I mean, women can have the capacity to repair. I don't understand, like,
All right, I'm standing in our front yard. 3 months ago, this was not.
Okay, so here's what I would say. Let's do this experiment this way. If women had access to all of the firearms on Earth that exist, okay, and every weapon which exists, and they have access to all of that, they still don't have the requisite brute force that would be necessary to keep men under control. They just wouldn't. It wouldn't be possible to do long term.
what do you mean
Even
by
short term.
what do you mean like by brute force? That they just
Men
wouldn't be
are-
able to pull the trigger?
No, that men are much, much, much stronger, and that
Yeah,
guns are only an equalizer until men take
you
the
should know
guns.
this, buddy.
Right,
Right?
obviously they would have to-
You just made fun of me because I'm talking to two people. So the fact that you seem surprised by the fact that I'm not paying for premium, maybe use your brain a little bit, buddy. Maybe realize that this is very new. I just started streaming and I'm very small. Obviously. Wow. It's not that hard to put two and two together, is it? I don't know. Maybe maths are hard. Quick maths are hard for some people. I get it.
get close enough. But I mean,
They
I don't
can.
care how strong you are if you don't have water and food. What
Well,
are you
it's
gonna
really
do?
simple then. Do you think that if you were the head of a prison, would you rather have all male or all female guards? If you were dealing with dangerous prisoners, even if both had access to guns?
I mean, I guess it would depend what the goal is. I think
To keep the
women-
prisoners who are dangerous under control.
I mean, I think women can make really great police officers because they are less likely to use excessive force. They're more likely to de-escalate, where men are more likely to escalate.
More likely to get disarmed, more likely to get beaten up, more likely to accidentally shoot a suspect. They're more likely to do all sorts of things to the contrary as well. But there's also way fewer females who are in the police force because they can't meet the minimum requirements, which are necessary to be a cop. They can't meet the necessary minimum physical requirements. Same thing in the military. They
Well,
can't meet the
okay.
necessary minimum physical requirements to be in the infantry. Most
Okay.
women can't do it.
Right.
So men have a monopoly on force, and because of force doctrine, this ends up coming down to this idea. If it is the case, you say that women can do anything that men can.
I have a job, Remus. I only do this once a week. I don't care that much about it. I just enjoy it. So, I don't really rely on this for income at all. It's just fun for me, and it's important to me. I like engaging in controversial topics. I think we all should do it more. So, yeah. Like, rent can't be this high. I don't know. Were you one of those people complaining about how inflation and egg prices are ruining everything? Because if so, then maybe rent is that high. You should come talk to me, though. It's way more fun to have a back and forth with a real person.
Do. I counter this by saying they cannot. They cannot do enforcement. This is uniquely a male thing. There are some women who can be introduced who can meet these standards, but on average they can't.
Well, I think if
Okay.
we're like to kind of bring it to an analogy, if the fence is 6 feet tall and most women are 5'8", then yeah, of course they're not going to be able to meet that standard. So is the standard just specific to certain male criteria that?
Well, it would be the criteria of you need to handle a male. So if you're a female police officer, you need to be able to handle a male, right?
Yeah, but obviously, like, you have tools to aid in that. That's what I'm saying. Like, just because women aren't meeting these criteria
Do you have to
doesn't
get
mean
close
that.
to a male when you're a police officer as a female in order to put like handcuffs on them, stuff like that?
Yeah, but you have like pepper spray and stun guns.
Yeah, and routinely women get disarmed, and they're
Yeah, and not to mention, usually you have a partner, right? Like, obviously, you should be able to stand your ground on your own, but like, cops go out in twos, so you're gonna have a partner to back you up if someone's trying to disarm you. But like, also, she should just bite the bullet a little bit, right? She should just admit that, like, on average, more women are not going to be capable of passing the tests for the police academy or military or whatever, but there still are plenty women who will pass the test, as we can see with our military and our police force. And especially when you have a partner as a woman, like, you guys will be able to subdue a man. And they do it all the time. There's videos. Go look up cop videos. You can find women all the time helping subdue a man.
routinely overpowered by suspects. Routinely. Happens often.
Cops don't
And-
go
Sure,
into
and
that.
then
Okay.
often you use excessive force, and then they're sued.
Yeah,
And then
maybe,
people
but
die,
when you
like-
say men use excessive force,
Yeah, you're right, Remus. They don't go do their speed traps in twos. I get that. They go patrol by themselves. But if there's a violent altercation, multiple people get called to the incident, don't they? You're not just going to send one policeman to a house that has a potential weapon or something. You're going to send backup.
of course, you're just demonstrating my point that men have a monopoly on force. Yes, maybe it's
No, I'm
excessive,
saying
but
a
they're capable of
propensity
using
to
it.
use force, sure.
No. They're just better at using force because they're much stronger. They're much stronger. They have much denser bones, so they're much
I
more
mean, I
capable
don't
of-
disagree with that.
Yeah, so
The
s-
average male
yeah.
is stronger, sure.
Well, significantly stronger. It's not an insignificant amount between the average male and average female. Now, I want this point to drive home because it's often stated like, oh yeah, there's this small marginal difference. No, it's a significant difference. 60, 70% in many cases.
Okay.
Much, much, much stronger. This being the case, men have the complete monopoly on force doctrine because they're much, much, much stronger. Just raw brute force, which if you reduce rights, you reduce society, reduce everything to its rawest principle, it's going to be brute force. I want to make you do thing. I always have this.
I don't agree, because with violence there can definitely come consequences that are not desirable in terms of the outcome. Like if men wanted women to be slaves, who determines if the species goes on?
Men.
Women.
No, men, if you were slaves.
How?
The same way they did in Rome. They impregnated their slaves.
Well, but women could just commit suicide.
Yeah, why
There
didn't
you
they
go.
in Rome?
Well, wouldn't that just be
Maybe they didn't want
black
to.
swan fallacy? Just because
It's still a hypothetical back to you, Andrew, right? Maybe the ones in Rome didn't want to. But just like your hypothetical, if it was the case that all women hated this slavery reproduction that you're suggesting, if it was the case that they did not like this and they wanted to protest, they could all at the same time decide we're going to kill ourselves and all our babies in our bellies. So, and yeah, you can kill yourself as a slave. You can be imprisoned and kill yourself, by the way. So, not to mention, those kids are going to be super messed up if you just have women tied down constantly while they're pregnant. Like, stressful environments make for very stressed kids. This is why cooperation is much better than brute force.
because there's that one example where they didn't.
Oh, no.
I think
That's
to a
in
specific
every
degree.
Here, we'll give you every example. They didn't do it under Genghis Khan. They didn't do
Yeah,
it
it would
in
just
Rome.
be again a black
They
swan
didn't.
fallacy.
So,
But I mean,
that's not a black swan fallacy, by the way. But that
how would it not be? We just haven't seen it,
Tell
so
me-
therefore it can't
well,
happen.
okay. So first of all, what I'm saying is I'm pointing to a historic standard
Sure.
and saying the
I
historic
understand
standard.
that.
And I asked you a question. I didn't make a propositional statement, so that's why it can't be fallacious.
But I would say that ultimately it does come down to women. If she doesn't want to sustain pregnancy and is a slave, she does obviously have the opportunity to kill herself.
Yes, but
like
that
you
is-
can't have society continue.
I will say that so I'll grant this. It is logically possible that all women who are enslaved can off themselves. Not disputing that.
Right.
However, it's also logically possible they do not, right?
Sure.
Okay, which one do you think is more likely then?
I mean, it would
that they
depend
do or
on
don't.
it would depend on so many different.
And same to your hypothetical, Andrew. Yes, hypothetically, logically speaking, all men could decide that we're going to band together and enslave all women. But it's also logically possible that all men do not do that. Which do you think is more likely? Because here I am, a man, Andrew, that would not band together with you as a brother and enslave women for reproduction. Because that's insane. So there's a lot of men like me out there. So it's probably a lot more likely that there are going to be men who fight back against you with the women, right? This is why your hypothetical is stupid. And so is her hypothetical in return is just as dumb. It's matching your dumb hypothetical.
Conditions.
Okay,
and
well then
contexts.
that's fair. So give me a single condition in which the female slaves of all of history have ever collectively offed themselves in order to prevent their own slavery.
Well, it wouldn't be to prevent their own slavery. It would be essentially to stop the, the next generation. And even if
That
you
would
do
be
have,
preventing slavery.
sure, and even if you do have women who are enslaved,
Can you give me an example of a
No,
single?
I can't.
Because
No.
there isn't any. There's no example.
but I'm sure you wouldn't say that that's moral.
Yeah, Remus, by the way, so WOR is completely correct. Look, like, I can engage in the claptrap. If you want some sass from me, you can pull it out. It's fun. It's fun for me. But I am here to actually talk about the points, to discuss the arguments, right? Not to just engage in your little dramas. Again, I will for fun. But maybe you could add something substantive to the discussion instead of coming in here with your like, dude, Dory doesn't even pay for premium. Like, okay, buddy. Like, I don't know. It's just pretty lowbrow. You can do better. I believe in you. I think you could do better.
That's
Well,
what men ought to do.
Well, I believe in objective morality. I'll make ought claims based on an unchanging standard, but you're a moral relativist. You can't be like, you can't do that. It's relative. It's
What do
totally
you mean?
relative. So is one set of morals of more value than another set of morals?
I think morale, like there are moral facts, if that's what you're asking me.
No, that's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you if one set of moral particulars has more value than another set of moral particulars.
I'm not sure how to answer.
Well, I would just need to know if... So, okay, for instance, we have one society over here that murders women and a society over here that does not murder women.
Okay.
Okay? Can you point to something objective that makes the society murdering women? There's some like moral claim that you can make which is objective for why that's wrong.
Well, I mean, murder by definition is wrong.
No. Why would it's the unjustified?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And unjust mean
Yeah, unjustified doesn't mean immoral.
well, it means wrong. If it's not just, then it's unjust, which would be wrong.
Okay. We'll rephrase then. They set the conditionals for something you would consider to be murder and say it isn't. It's the justified killing of this group of people here. You consider it murder. What makes their moral facts wrong?
I mean, obviously, it would depend on reason and context.
So you can, with reason and context, determine which moral facts are correct?
I think you can have certain observations when it comes to the outcomes. I mean, that would be consequentialism. I think there can be moral facts in terms of there are things that are always wrong regardless of context.
Like
Rape.
Here's how I got my team to use Monday Sales CRM and actually like it.
She seems
Let me start
like
by saying
Why would
kind
that-
of a pluralist particularist. I don't think she should actually bite the bullet that there are some things, because universalism gets tricky if you want to be a pluralist and a particularist, because you can probably think of some crazy hypotheticals in which, you know, rape or something or killing or whatever else is more justified than some other contextual setup. So, I get it. I feel like there are certain things that we should try to hold to universally, but there still could like hypothetically be a contextual situation in which it doesn't hold. And that's kind of the point of particularism and pluralism.
It'd always be wrong.
Well, rape would always be wrong.
Grape. We'll say grape.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, that was right.
Yeah.
Grape would always be wrong because it would because of the harm that it causes.
Yeah. Why is harm wrong?
Because harm is, I mean, again, I would say harm by definition is wrong, because it is an undesirable outcome within our subjective experience.
Okay, so are all undesirable outcomes immoral?
No.
Okay, well then, then you just contradicted your position.
Sure.
So then you can't point to a set of particulars, which are...
I think then, again, that would be kind of, based on obviously the scale of harm. I think if there's a certain degree
It
of
wouldn't
harm,
matter. It's if it is the case...
By the way, Andrew, as a Christian who holds to Christian ethics and virtue, so if pushed on him enough, I've seen it in the past, you can get him to admit that even Christian morals are sometimes contextual and not always universal. For example, there's a story in the Bible, I forget where it's from exactly, but it's about somebody who's been walking through the desert and they are very, very thirsty, sort of dying of thirst. They stumble upon a well of water that's not theirs. They would have to steal it in order to survive. And even here, the Bible would justify this act of stealing someone else's property in order to sustain your own livelihood, which, obviously there is a commandment not to steal. But this is just showing that that commandment itself is not actually universal, because we can find situations in which the context tells us through our reasoning and our observations that this universal principle doesn't hold here. The person's dying of thirst. They can steal that water from the well in order to sustain their health.
That nothing which is against your subjective experience that you consider harmful is bad, except by your own experience, then we're just back to relativism. It's
Sure.
like, yeah, you're never going to get past relativism. So I don't really know how you can make the claim that this is worse than that. But if you do, right, I'm just willing to grant that you have a principle and will adhere to the principle for the purpose of the debate, so we don't bog it down with relativism
Sure.
versus non-relativism.
Okay.
We'll kind of just give you the out there because there's no reason to stay on it. But back to this idea of let's see, right before that, when we were diving into
Your
force
Yeah.
and force doctrine. Yeah, so I would say that might makes. I'm not saying right. I'm not going to make the claim that it makes right, but it
Okay.
does make. And so I think that force doctrine is the necessary requisite for rights. It's the necessary requisite to have a nation. It's the necessary requisite to have anything. It's force.
I disagree because we could obviously agree on rights and have a cooperative
I
nature.
agree. We could agree on rights. And then if somebody violates the rights, what do we use?
I mean, I would be more towards restorative justice, as well as obviously centering the harm that the victim causes.
Both of those require force.
Why the hell is this Zoom being so weird? What the?
I can agree to some
What is
extent,
going
but
on?
I don't think necessarily if rights violations happen, that what the punishment or what the outcomes is what one would deem justice. I would say the conditions to which society is to prevent harm would be the ultimate goal.
That would require force.
How?
Because if somebody violates any of your principles or any of your rights, how do you get them to not do that?
Well, I think rights violations happen for specific reasons within society. Like if you were to say you were to say that you violated my rights by coming in my house and stealing all my stuff, then if we're in a society of capitalism to where people are subjected to poverty and need access to material goods.
Okay, let's say we have communism. Communism can't exist without force. It's impossible.
Well, that's again like an example of how we would prevent rights violations, because I would say, like, if the right is violated, did you really have it to begin with?
Yeah, but you're baking into your hypothetical here. Oh, you violated my right, and now we have done, and you did it based on some conditional of some externality that drove you to this.
Sure.
Right? Forget that, right? They just fucking want to. They just want to.
I think that's just a lazy presupposition.
That people just want to do things?
Yeah, to just
So,
want to cause harm. To just
Psychopaths don't
want
exist? Sociopaths, narcissists, these people don't exist? Or
I
they
mean,
do?
they do exist, but again, we're talking about what conditions they exist under, and those are very rare.
Okay, I'll even grant that it's rare.
Yeah.
I'll even grant that it's rare. Can you
But I
give-
don't think people are born psychopaths or
Can you just-
sociopaths. Again, I would say those are environmental conditions.
Okay, like what, nourishment?
Well, no, your brain is a social organ, and so it responds to your environment. I think they did a study where they analyzed, I forget how many serial killers' brains, but or serial unalivers, but they all had severe damage to the orbital region.
Can we get over this
Why?
fucking TikTok language? Like, oh my god, I'm so tired of people having to say unalive, grape. Like, can we just be adults? Like, just tag the content as not for kids. Let's just use the words, right? We don't have to go off like using slurs and bigotry, but can we just say things like kill and rape? Like, we obviously have to talk about these things. Oh man, it drives me nuts. And I know it's not really our fault as the interlocutors and debaters. It's the companies who are putting restrictions on these in their TOS, but it's just getting super annoying, man.
Like, take a look at the data there.
Sure.
But was there a meta-analysis done on it?
I can't remember if it was a meta-analysis. I want to say it was, but I
Okay.
can't remember.
Well, in any case, it doesn't really matter. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what society you live in. There's gonna be a prerequisite requirement for force, no matter what. Doesn't matter how. Like, could you even give me in a society in which that would not be the case?
I mean, it's hard to conceptualize in terms of, I think if we had a society based on technology, what do you mean by force? Are we just talking about like violence?
If you have a society in which people have if you have any sort of laws, or you have any sort of rights at all, then
Well, I agree with you that laws do.
The only thing which would create a prevention of the violation of said thing by a person would be the requirement of force. So if I want...
I mean, I don't know how force prevents rights violations necessarily in
It's the
those
only
instances.
thing that prevents rights violations.
I mean, well, if you're saying men have the monopoly on force, then that's instilled within patriarchy, then why do rights violations occur?
Well, no, that doesn't even follow. It would just follow that men are the only ones who could stop rights violations. I mean, at least in mass.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the only thing that would follow from that. It's like men are the ones in mass who would stop rights violations, which is exactly what happens right now. They are the ones in mass who stop rights violations.
I think when we talk about that too, like obviously, the entity that is in control of force also can commit rights violations.
Sure.
So.
Don't disagree at all.
Okay.
Totally agree.
So I don't think that the way to society and essentially to establish rights is necessarily through force.
It's the only way it can be. Well, what happens if you violate somebody's right then?
I mean, what do you mean what happens?
Well, how do you stop them from doing that?
Well, they already did it. What do you mean, how do you stop them?
Well, okay. So I want to take over your country, right?
Why?
Are you just going to let me walk in and do that, or?
Well, I mean, why? And again, like, do you really have like the modes of production and the
feel
materials?
like it.
Yeah, it's disregarding diplomacy, first of all, which I understand doesn't always work, right? People get invaded, that happens. But it's disregarding diplomacy, and it's disregarding social organizations of production, which I think that's what she's getting at, right? We can't actually have an enforcement arm, which I can agree with Andrew that it is, on average, mostly men, right? These are mostly men that enforce our rights, secure our borders, whatever else. But we can't even have those unless we first have good social relations and economic relations of production. People can't have more kids if they don't have food flowing in. So we can't even raise more men to be enforcers if we don't first have good social relations and economic relations. So to act like all of this isn't interdependent is a bit silly. Like, you can't just have a state with just strong men enforcing things. You need a lot of other things to even have those men in the first place, which is why cooperation is the better mode of existing, not oppression and forcing women to have babies or whatever else.
I just don't think people wake up and just say, I feel like doing this.
Do you feel like
motive
rapists
behind
wake up and feel like graping?
Wake up and feel like raping?
Mm-hmm.
No,
Like they
not
say,
necessarily.
today is the day?
No.
No?
No.
No? So, again, I'm actually really confused now.
I
So-
think
so
there are
you have-
instances, sure, where rape can be premeditated.
If we didn't enforce
but
our laws, are you saying people would break them more or less?
if we didn't enforce our laws,
Would people break them more or less?
I think it would depend on the law.
Any law.
I mean, do you not schmurder because it's illegal?
There's probably a lot of people that I'd like to
Well,
if it was legal.
I'm just asking.
Murder's fine, by the way.
Okay.
As an owner of Walton Goggins goggle glasses, I know how to make slick-looking goggle/glasses.
So, like, you and I would have
do you murder? Do you not murder because it's illegal?
You and I would have a distinction in what we would consider murder to be. Right? You and I would have a distinction in that.
What do you mean?
I
thought we agreed it's unjust killing.
Yeah, but what we consider justified to be would be different.
Okay.
So that would be where we would have a semantic distinction there, right? So, for instance, if somebody was
So,
stealing,
per the
hang
law-
on, I'll
okay,
explain.
go
So,
ahead, sorry.
someone is stealing property.
Mm-hmm.
Are you entitled to kill them?
I mean, per the law, sure.
No, but do you think morally?
Oh, morally?
Yeah. Like somebody's taking off with your TV.
Oh, no.
Yeah, see, I think dead, right? So you see, we have a distinction in justification.
Sure.
So you think that's murder. I think, no, it's not. So to answer your question, yeah. If the law wasn't there to say you can't shoot him
That's
if he's stealing
crazy.
your TV.
So you would shoot someone who is stealing your TV?
Yeah. In the face.
In the face?
Multiple times.
Multiple times.
Yes. Yes.
That's
Wow.
With an Uzi.
It's a crazy place to plant your flag.
Yeah.
It
Or,
really is.
Whatever was convenient.
I wonder, she should push him on this in his own ethical framework, right? Where in Christianity, in the Bible, does it say if someone is thieving your stuff, you are justified in just killing them completely, right? Like, not just stopping them, subduing them, maybe cutting off a limb or whatever else, but where does it say you're actually justified in straight up killing them?
Convenient, yeah. What's wrong with that?
I would say that the loss of their life certainly outweighs your TV.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
if the TV didn't outweigh their ability to run, I probably would have missed, right? But the thing is you know what else would have prevented this? Them not stealing my TV.
That's true.
Is the context here? This is a home invasion.
Yeah.
Like it's in your house.
Yeah. Well, no, I
Well,
think you can. I think you have the ability to defend your property.
Yeah.
And
if-
that your
disagree.
property, anything that's within the domain of, on your physical property, right? Meaning property you own. I consider that all to be the French word curtilage.
Mm-hmm.
And anything within the viewpoint of curtilage is a violation of your actual property, and therefore a rights violation. You have every right to put that person down so that you don't encourage additional people to do it. So in many ways, I think you're defending not just yourself, but everybody around you if more people took that stance.
I think the better solution would be to recognize why someone's stealing your TV.
Okay, yeah. So, but how does that prevent them from doing it? So, okay, we're
Yeah.
investigating it now.
Because if we can actually look at society and our social relations and our economic relations of production, we could probably try and determine what it is that is compelling people to steal, right? Not just looking at our economic relations, but looking at sociology, psychology. There is a truth, there is an answer to this. There is a reason behind people stealing, and that doesn't justify it at all. But if we can look at the reason for things like this and identify it right there at the root, maybe we can start to organize in better ways in which less people would just stop stealing in general.
By the way, we've been investigating why people steal shit for about 100 years, and you know what? We haven't really prevented people from stealing shit. But I'll just grant to you that we could.
Isn't it just scarcity, though?
I'll just grant to you that we could. No.
Well,
No.
we could. I mean, you have to admit that there is an answer, whether we found it or not, right? There is an answer somewhere. So, maybe he would just say the answer is human depravity. All of us are born in sin, and just there's literally no way to make it so that people don't want to steal. I guess if that's his answer, then fine. But there's bound to be a material answer as well.
People steal even when there's no scarcity. Bernie Madoff took off with how many people's pensions? There was no scarcity
Well,
for
I
him.
think capitalism creates scarcity even when there's abundance. That, it's never enough. You're
That
going to
sounds
lose
like a code.
this.
So Bernie Madoff, who had everything, just needed more.
Yeah. How many rich people have clearly enough money to live the rest of their life, not have to work, but still work?
Yeah, and how many women, right, who are living middle-class lifestyles steal for fun? They literally will steal things for fun because it gives them a thrill.
Sure.
And it's so there could just be the example of greed and the example of, I want to do this thing because I really like doing it. And it's
I think there's a specific reason behind certain psychological habits or impulses, if you will.
Sure, but you can't cure the human condition. You can't.
How do you know that's the human condition, though?
Because we've been dealing with greed, and we've been dealing with these problems, at least in the 20th, 21st century, even with the marching of science. We have not been able to just increase people's material positions in life, and then crime suddenly goes away. That element will always be there. Now, I think you can reduce it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you can't reduce it. Like,
Right.
people in abject poverty do commit crime more. Not saying that that's not the case.
Sure.
What I am saying, though, is that in the interim time while you're trying to solve it, it doesn't change the fact this guy has my TV.
I never said it did.
Yeah, and so I see that as completely justified in blowing his face right off.
I disagree.
Why? Yeah, but why, though?
Again, I would say the life has more value than the TV.
Okay, let's see if you actually believe that.
Okay.
This would necessarily entail that his life had more value than any of your property.
What do you mean?
Not
Well, I mean-
necessarily. If you have property such as food that sustains your livelihood, right? That property is much more valuable than a TV. You see, you got to understand that values can exist on a spectrum, that we might value our coffee more than we value our t-shirts, for example, right? Or the easy example is the one that's already on the table, that we value food and nutrition more than we value a TV. Maybe not some people, but I think they'd quickly find out if they had to choose that they would choose food. So yeah, it's not all on equal footing here.
You're not going to put a number on his life, right? His life's worth more than all the money in the world, isn't it?
But money also buys food. And if you're literally draining someone's bank account or stealing all of their food, you are borderline killing that person, right? In which the justification for self-defense goes up. It makes it more justified to defend yourself against getting your livelihood, your food taken away than one single TV, right? This is why it's a spectrum of value. We don't value TVs the same as we value our nutrients, that what sustains our life.
It's a man?
Woman.
Oh, then yes.
Yeah, fair enough. So this chick who wants to steal my TV, why can't she steal my house?
How would you steal someone's house?
You squat.
Squatters?
Yeah. And now you've stolen my house and you've put me and my family on the street. Can I blow you away then?
Can you or ought?
Should
Should you?
Ought you morally be able to then?
I would say that housing, because obviously it affects the outcomes of your family's well-being or their own survival, would be
Then
justified.
your position here is inconsistent.
No,
You
it's
just
not.
said
I don't
that
think it's
property,
inconsistent.
No.
It's not. It's not.
You completely missed it, right? She's saying that this is more valuable. This is more justified to defend yourself against because your livelihood, your shelter is more valuable to you than your TV, right? If someone's literally taking the livelihood away from you and your family, you have very much more of a right to defend yourself against that than someone walking away with one TV. It's really not that hard.
Not the property itself. If you had another house to go to that house.
So wait. So if I had two properties, they could chase me out of one of them because I had someplace else to go.
I don't think you should kill them.
But I can't kill them if they're chasing me out of the one place I have to go.
Well, I would say, is that the only solution?
I mean, or you could call law enforcement and then they potentially kill them, trying to arrest them or whatever.
I'm just asking you if is that the only solution?
Well, I mean, right now, I think that
It's just in your hypothetical. I mean.
Oh, and within the confines of the hypothetical? No, you can have different solutions, right?
Then obviously I would opt for different solutions. I mean, why would they want your house?
Who knows? They squat in people's houses all the time.
Because they don't have houses?
No, I think a lot of
Because they don't
times.
have housing?
I think a lot of times people do have access to housing. They don't want to work, and they squat inside of people's houses because it's free.
Again, I just think that's like a capitalist assessment of human behavior as somehow being human nature.
Yeah, but this doesn't really answer my question about why it is that I can't kill them for taking my TV. It's mine.
I agree.
Yeah, why can't? So if you take my shit, I kill because it's taking away from my kids, right? If you take away.
What?
Well, if you take my TV, I have to replace it, right?
Sure.
That's going to cost me money.
Sure.
That necessarily takes food and resource away from my children, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So then that's
First of all, you don't have to replace it, but like to be fair, you should be able to. If someone steals from you, like you should be able to replace it or get it back from them, right? Why didn't you just call those big, strong men of yours that are enforcing the law? And they'll get it back for you, won't they? They're big, strong men, Andrew. Just let them deal with it. Why do you personally need to just take the life of another because they have one of your TVs? And there's sort of a conflation with the law here of the like, can you do this? Can you do that? Well, what you can or can't do is just whatever the law in your area is. That's the can and the can't. But morally speaking, like maybe you should consider as a human being looking at another human being, is this really justified to your own values and standards that you can just kill someone because they have your TV? Clearly, that's much different than them stealing all your money or stealing all your food to feed your family.
necessarily what you're actually doing when you steal my TV is
I think it would just be depending on the degree.
Yeah, you're taking things from my children, right? And so the thing is my reason,
potentially, sure.
Not potentially. If I have to replace the TV and I have to replace the TV with my money, that's going to
who knows?
necessarily
Maybe
be less.
instead of, buying beer that week, you buy the TV.
Okay, so let's say your budget is set in such a way where you only have X amount of money per week, like most American families.
Sure.
Yeah. So then you're still taking money away from my kids, right?
Yeah. If you decide to replace the TV.
And you can also file, you can get the police involved. You can charge these people, right? You can get money back and get a new TV. Like, again, you just made this big old argument about the enforcement arm of our society. So why don't you just use the enforcement arm as it's meant to be used to get money for your TV or get it back, right? Get this person prosecuted and punished. You really need to just vigilante, unalive somebody for the TV in the moment. It's that threatening to your livelihood that a TV is walking away?
I don't know. If it were between food for my child and a TV, I would probably do food for my child.
Yeah, sure. But the thing is now you have to allocate funds away from your children. So any dollar dollar you take from me, regardless of what I normally would have spent it on, is taking money away from my kids necessarily.
Possibly, sure.
Yeah. So the thing is if you take from my kids, I kill you. Problem is, it seems reasonable to me. It's within the confines of reason. Logically stacks up.
I don't think so. I think that would just be depending on degree.
Why does it depend on the degree? If you don't steal shit, you don't get shot. It's simple. What's the degree?
I mean, what if they were stealing food? Would that be an issue for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think a person has a right to defend their food.
I mean, would you find it more justified if someone is would you steal food to feed your children?
Hold up.
Possibly.
Hold up.
But do I think a person
I
is
would.
not justified?
So I'm going to be talking to Space Apache, but he just...
Brother.
Oh, yo, how's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Are you...
All right, so, what?
Oh, I was just asking if you were calling for logistics or calling to talk right now.
No, we're not doing it right now. I was just calling to tell you to make sure you knew that I was available for 12:30 for time frame.
Okay. And that's in
It's
about
up to you.
half hour or an hour, right?
Kind half hour to an hour. Yeah, probably closer to an hour, to be honest with you, because I got to take care of some stuff before I get break. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that works for me.
All right, man. See you then.
Yep. See you in a bit.
All
right. So we're going to talk to him in a little bit. And right now I'm going to hurry and take a quick little break. Got to use the bathroom.
From digging up the worms, I'm a can split open, happy to rehearse while the people stand shoulder to shoulder and take the stage like stop. You're dragging anchors from the dirt while the whole world suffers from digging up the worms. I'm a can split open, happy to rehearse while the
So, about an hour, maybe a little less, I'm going to be talking to Space Apache about his honor system and how it compares to morals and values and whatever else. We'll probably get off subject and just talk about a bunch of random shit between politics, religion, morality, whatever else, whatever we stumble into. So, that should be a good time.
Justified in doing something about that? I think they are.
I'm not saying they're not justified in doing something about that. I'm
Right.
saying, like, obviously the reaction to,
Yeah. So
to
what
would
would
be
I
justified or
do?
not.
Can I see myself doing a bad thing on behalf of my children?
Yeah.
Sure. But that doesn't mean that I, within the confines of reason, don't understand that a person can't do something about that. It's like, you can't
Right,
say, well,
I'm not saying that, you can do
Yeah.
nothing. I
Right.
think you could try and take the TV back, and, punch them in the face.
well, that's dangerous.
Sure.
They can punch you back.
Yeah, so is shooting them. They could shoot at you back.
Usually if you shoot at somebody,
You wake up late, have an unhealthy breakfast, you finish the gym early. That's right, I know what you're doing. And if this
I don't know
And they're
how you
holding
can
a
say
team.
my situation's dangerous, but
Again, I don't understand. They just spent all this time talking about how men are this enforcement arm, the police who come enforce the rights. When injustices happen, such as a TV getting stolen, with an enforcement arm that Andrew is arguing for, why don't you just contact them and they will take care of it? That's the whole point, isn't it? Like, it just seems super unnecessary to take a life for a TV. The fact that they're getting so hung up on this is crazy to me.
yours isn't.
if somebody's running with your TV and you're shooting at them, I don't think they're going to be shooting back.
They're very skilled.
They're going to hold the TV like this.
This
and
is so
grab-
I mean,
silly.
they're thin.
This
Yeah,
is
you can
getting
use one arm
silly
and,
and out of hand.
You don't think that's
What
like
is going
moderately
on
deranged?
here?
I don't think
Yikes.
it's moderately deranged.
You don't think so? You don't think that TVs require two hands for men to carry them?
No. I mean, I guess it depends how big the TV is.
Like your living room TV? You're gonna.
I
take
mean, my
both
living
hands.
room TV is big,
Yeah.
but like my bedroom
Also,
TV is small.
by the way,
Okay,
it's just
this
less
is
dangerous
so
in general
goofy.
if you
What the
fire the
fuck?
first shot.
What are they arguing about right now? Like, can we get back to the point? What? This has gone so off the rails.
Chances are pretty good that that's the end of the confrontation.
I mean, if you hit them, yeah.
No, you don't even have to hit them. Just fire the shot even.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. Even that usually is enough to end the confrontation. So
Okay.
anyway, I guess we've stayed on force doctrine for a while.
Yes.
Did you want to cross-examine me on this?
I guess I am curious in terms of if you see, so you don't make this as a moral claim. It's just kind of a fact
It's a
of reality.
descriptive claim.
So do you think men should do these things? Like,
Which things?
that they should use force as an authority against women?
Well, sometimes. In some cases, sure. Like if
Like
a
what?
woman's committing a crime, something like that, I think men are totally justified in using force. I think if a woman attacks a man, he's totally justified in using force.
I'm talking as like a societal.
Yeah, but these are societal prescriptions. If a woman attacks a man, yeah, it's perfectly acceptable for him to
Sure. So,
smack her
but
up.
there are instances where you say like if, like, would you condone wife beating?
Well, no, but I wouldn't condone husband beating. So
Sure, but you're
yeah.
saying that men's authority is through force. This is how why
No.
we should have patriarchy.
No, enforcement. Not so. That's the
But
requisite.
enforcement
for,
is.
Yeah, it is force. Yes. Yeah, but that
So
doesn't mean
authority is through
Remember, my
force.
claim is that might makes, not that it makes right,
Okay.
but that it.
So it's not a
shapes.
moral ought.
No, it's not. It's just a descriptive.
So
truth.
do you think that men should work to cooperate with women in society?
No, I think women should cooperate with men in society because they
What
depend
does
on.
co mean?
Yeah, I'll explain. I think that
Why does
women
nobody want
depend
kids?
on men
What the hell?
for the use of force doctrine for their own protection. So I think.
I
they
mean, I
should
think under
cooperate.
patriarchy, sure.
No, I think under matriarchy they still depend on men for force.
Well, you said protection, right?
Yeah, force.
Yeah. What are you protecting them from?
Well, you could be protecting them from other men generally.
Right. So, I think under patriarchy, male violence is pervasive.
Under
And so that
matriarchy, male
creates-
violence is still pervasive.
Why?
why is having a female leader going to make male violence no longer pervasive? That's bizarre. There's a difference between saying I have a society that's just filled 100% with women. That would be a claim.
It's not bizarre. I agree that she needs to give the reasoning for it. But to just say it's bizarre isn't really a counter. We should just ask for the reasoning, right? To load it, to poison the well with saying it's bizarre is to preemptively strike down her reasoning before she gave it, right? That's called poisoning the well. So we could say that, generally speaking, whichever society produces more cooperation rather than resistance or oppression or whatever is anti-cooperation. Now, do we know that more like of a woman-led and an egalitarian or whatever else leads to more cooperation? No, not necessarily. But the point being that in patriarchies, it seems a lot of women end up not liking that, and they sort of protest and rebel against the system because something's happening that they don't like, and so it's feeding into less cooperation. So whatever system can produce more cooperation between the sexes and everybody really is going to be the one that requires less enforcement, less violence, less of all the things that are less desirable, essentially.
But you're not saying that.
Well,
you're talking about a matriarchy versus a patriarchy.
Right, but I think when it comes to patriarchy, obviously we're talking about male supremacy and domination.
Yeah.
And a form of domination is through violence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with all of that. So
yeah.
what?
So obviously if that's not a tenet of matriarchy, then I don't think male violence would be pervasive because it's not used as a form of authority.
Are there still going to be men there?
Yeah.
What's going to make them less violent?
Well, obviously because it's not used as a form of authority. It's
but I just got to telling you that
violence is not tied to masculinity.
And by the way, simply saying that, like, if we got rid of patriarchy, that doesn't mean the only other option is matriarchy, right? That this isn't a binary system. There's something called, let me look it up here so that I can define it correctly, but it's called matrilineal society. Right? This comes from some indigenous philosophies, and it's based on kinship with the mother, the basically DNA line of the mother, and like how we pass down our property to our children and everything goes through the mother. And matrilineal societies, they can operate in not a matriarchy where women are just supreme and have all the authority, but actually more of an egalitarian sense in that women have a say in the politics and the leadership, right? So it's not just one or the other here.
Men are, and women are, women will depend on men for the use of force, period. That's my claim, regardless of where they are. So it doesn't matter if you have a queen. And it doesn't even matter if you put women
I think if you
as the CEOs of everything.
Are we assuming that like just authority in general is force?
No. Authority in general isn't force, but in order to have rights or laws or governance of any kind requires force.
I mean, I don't disagree with that.
Which is fine, right? Because women leader can have authority through respect. If there's a woman queen, there can be a bunch of men who very much value her leadership, who respect her as a queen, respect her authority, and they listen to her and do her enforcement, right? Like, he's acting like there's just no world in which a man could respect a woman's leadership and authority and still be the enforcement arm for her. This is why cooperation is better than like some oppressive system or forced cooperation. We can have men and women respect each other. If there's a woman in a leadership position, if there's a man in a leadership position, doesn't really matter. If they're a good leader, they're a good leader. And the men who enforce that society can simply just respect their leader.
That's going to require men. So women are dependent upon men for force, period. So I think
under a system of law, sure.
Under any system of governance. There's no system of governance in which women are not dependent on men for force. None.
You don't think that can be replaced with technology?
Nope. How? Men can destroy the technology. That's what force doctrine is.
Men maybe in groups too, but can I say that about women?
No, because you're still going to have to compete with the male group. So your only options here are either this. Like, let's even say you reduce the male population down to 5%. You're just like, yay, it's all women now, and it's 5% men or something like this. You still would have a hard time controlling them. We know this because there have been war-torn nations where like 80% of the men have died, and they're still in charge because of that monopoly on force. It's not because women don't have access to guns. They have access to guns, but they're less good with them. Guns require physical strength. Technology requires physical strength. Like tanks, it requires physical strength to load one.
Okay, I mean,
Okay, if there's one AI site builder you need to meet, it's this dope tech from Wix.
when we're talking about cooperation, like co means with, so what's the delineation between you saying women should cooperate with men rather than men should cooperate with women?
Because men have the option that women don't have of utilizing force to make you cooperate.
Then that's not cooperating.
Yeah, well, it is.
Well,
hang on, but it is still cooperation. So the idea here is just this. Is it the case that men should cooperate with women? I guess if they choose to.
Well, that's what cooperation is.
I would just say if they choose to.
That is.
I wouldn't say that they should.
Cooperation.
I mean, they're going to be the ones who make the rules because they have the force.
How is this cooperation? Because you're defining cooperation in a way that I don't think most of us would say is cooperation anymore, right? Like if you want to use a different term, but forcing someone else to cooperate is not cooperate. Co meaning the two parties both agreeing, willingly engaging in the relation. That's cooperation, right? Forcing them to do that is no longer cooperation. Like, I don't know how you're going to get yourself out of this one. Hopefully she presses you on it.
But that's not cooperation.
Well, it can be cooperation.
No, co means with.
Yeah, it is with.
It's doing it together.
Are you saying that if somebody's in a position of authority, necessarily that's not a cooperation? Like, do you not cooperate with your children?
I mean, I do cooperate with my children.
Yeah, so then
but that's
aren't you an authority?
That's not authority.
You're not an authority?
An authority in what sense?
You're in charge.
In charge of certain things, sure.
You're in charge of everything.
What do you mean I'm in charge of everything? I don't tell him like what he needs to play.
Can little Johnny tell you he's not going to the doctor today, Mom? Can he tell you he's not going to school?
I mean, if he's sick, sure.
Can he tell you he's not going to school?
Again, if he's sick, that's a possibility.
Okay, but
or
you
I
think
don't want to go to school. I'm not feeling well.
You think he's lying? He's like, Mom, I'm sick. You think he's lying? Is Johnny going to school?
Most likely.
Yeah. So.
But that's not cooperative. That's me using my
authority. When he goes and gets in the car, and he's quiet. When you take him to school and you drop him off, that is cooperation.
No,
I see what you mean in
that sense. Obeying,
maybe there's a word.
Right? That's the child obeying. So he's obeying his mom even though he doesn't want to. Cooperation would be them both agreeing that this is the best path. This is the relation we both want to engage in, right? So this is where authority is different than cooperation. You can have a leader who makes a decision, and then the other party can obey, right? Or they can get whatever punishment you deem necessary for them not obeying. But that is not the same thing as cooperation, where both parties are reciprocally agreeing to engage in a certain way.
A better word that I'm trying to think of, where it's more working together and negotiating, where there is no necessary authority, like a partnership.
Yeah, but why should men have a partnership when they have the monopoly on force? I don't see why they need to have a partnership with women.
Why would you want to subjugate women?
It's not subjugation any more than it is with your children.
Why would you not want a partnership? That's the whole point. Like, people work better collaboratively and cooperatively. Right? It's just like, look at slaves, for example. You could say they have an economic boom for a second. A society with a slave system has some economic boom, but ultimately they're going to crumble. They're going to collapse, and the slaves are going to revolt, and it's going to be bloody. it doesn't lead to a better system. What a better system is a cooperative, collaborative one in which everybody is engaging willingly, if possible. Maybe an entire system like that isn't fully possible, especially for a Marxist who's anti-capitalist. But yeah, this like. Not to mention, women and men genuinely work better together. Like, we have different strengths that we can bring to the table and make each other better. Like, a good woman will push a man to go chase their dreams, their passions, their aspirations, right? It's not like they won't just like sit there and ride along the coattails. A good woman will make you better because that's a good partnership. And the same in return. Like, a good man will make a good woman better. I don't even understand this at all.
So I think it's a privileged position that they get because they have the use of force. If they can be drafted and women can't, they get extra rights. Women don't get.
Again, I don't think that like war and the draft can always be like a necessary condition of the human existence.
Okay, give me a single 100-year span in which there wasn't massive war.
The Iroquois lived in peace for 600 years.
No, the Iroquois fought plenty, especially within the Iroquois.
I mean, there is a period of time, but there was also a period of treaty and peace.
The Iroquois are you talking about the Iroquois Confederacy?
No, the indigenous tribe, the Iroquois.
Yeah, I know. They had a confederacy, though.
Okay.
Yeah, so the confederacy meaning like in the United States, but under like a loose doctrine of law. The Iroquois Confederacy. My understanding is that the Iroquois fought endlessly, along with most Native American tribes.
No, there was a period of, I would have to look up the source, a period of 600 years of peace. No, I don't think war is a continuous state of mankind. War is just fighting over resources.
Yeah, you sure?
Yeah.
And mankind's always fighting over resources.
Well, yeah, because of either scarcity or manufactured scarcity.
Well, I mean, scarcity can simply happen naturally, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Are we talking about like?
So
like
if you
famine?
so if you just have natural scarcity, which happens all the time, you can have conflict, and the enforcers in that conflict are going to be men. Men are going to be the defenders of your country,
right?
your
But when it
nation, your
comes to
household.
like natural scarcity, then obviously if you're in like communal groups, then that scarcity can be overcome where there's abundance.
Not always. Depends on what it is. Like, how are you going to communally in a group do anything about a food shortage? There's no food.
Other communities.
Yeah, if you have access to them.
Right, and I would say like in today's society we absolutely do.
Yeah, that's true. In today's society, we do have global trade, things like this. You can assist people with various things. War hasn't gone away at all. Not even a little bit.
Well,
in the 20th, 21st
right,
century,
because
there's
of
been more warfare than
manufactured.
ever.
Yeah, because of manufactured scarcity. I agree.
No, it's not always because of manufactured scarcity.
Yeah, it would be dependence theory.
Okay, so why did we go to war with Germany? That was over
time?
scarcity the second time?
World War II?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the rise of fascism.
So what was the scarcity?
Well, within that one, I would say obviously it was like authoritarian regimes.
There was a manufactured scarcity here as well, actually, because the Nazis were telling everybody how the Jews were boycotting them economically, ruining Germany through economics and their boycotts and their culture and their society. So yes, there was some type of manufactured scarcity, which got the populace of German people to side with the Nazis out of fear. They're like, we're losing our country. We're losing, everything's costing more because these guys are boycotting our economics. So yeah, that is an example of manufactured scarcity.
Trying
what was
to
the
enact
scarcity
land.
Though? From who?
From Germany. Germany was trying to...
How did that affect us?
I mean, it didn't, but obviously we wanted to stop imperialism.
So it didn't have anything to do with scarcity for us, did it?
I mean, it eventually down the line, it was America's concern that Germany or Russia would become a superpower and then start to come take our land.
Why does nobody want to have babies?
Wait, what?
I'm sounding
So
like
there was no
Andrew
scarcity
Wilson
for us,
in my game.
And we still got involved in the war. It's
Nobody
not always
wants
about
kids.
scarcity of resources.
I mean, I do think it is somewhat of a basis. Because
That there's not-
isn't that where regimes are about?
Their
or
comfort
about
is
power,
less in
authority
this
over
one.
your land and your people.
Yeah, your
and
land and your
acquiring-
people.
and acquiring
Okay.
resources.
Yeah, what does that have to do with us? We didn't have to get involved in that war.
I know you're absolutely right. We didn't.
Yeah, so, but we didn't get involved
But I'm
in
saying
it.
that the
it wasn't even
basis-
packaged as like resource problems. Nothing. So what
I mean-
resources were we without?
I'm saying that's like the crux of war.
It wasn't the crux of that war.
I mean, we were intervening in order to stop the imperialism from Germany to,
Very
to other
strange.
countries.
How does that? Well, here's the thing. Even if we had let it go, wouldn't we have benefited from that?
I mean, it's hard to say.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, that had nothing to do with scarcity. I don't think that the propensity for human war and violence is always about scarcity and resource. I think that that's Marxist nonsense.
What would it be about?
Oh, it could be about all sorts of different things. It could be about an idea of conquest.
You ever look at someone and think, how do they handle everything so well? Why don't things seem to affect them?
Yeah, and by the way,
Right.
it doesn't have to be about scarcity or manufactured scarcity, right? It could, like, even without the manufactured scarcity in Germany, it still could have happened just simply on the cultural imperialist point, in the sense that, you know, they thought they were the superior race that ought to just go take all this land and sort of reproduce the superior race, all this stuff. So yeah, it doesn't have to have the scarcity of resources, but it's just a common feature. And if scarcity of resources is something that we can actually solve, then it could lessen war. If that's something that is commonly a part of war, then maybe solving it or not manufacturing it could help solve some wars. That doesn't mean it's going to solve all wars, right? It's like, I feel like he's conflating this idea of all and most again, where sometimes he'll hold someone to, you know, the position of, well, you have to justify all wars being on a scarcity thing or whatever else, rather than just, no, this is a common feature. And if we fix this feature specifically, that could reduce some wars. Like, we don't have to hold them to all wars for all time.
What do you mean by conquest?
Oh, I want to take over everything because I want to.
Well, isn't land a resource?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that it's, what's the scarcity? You have plenty of land. You just want more anyway.
Yes.
But how does that come down to scarcity? Because you're saying the motivation
It's essentially,
is, I don't have enough of
It's
it.
essentially acquisition of resources. And if you have more resources, then you're less likely to have scarcity.
Okay, so you agree with me that kings are the ones who send their people to war.
Yeah.
Do kings have a lack of resources?
I mean, not within like their own personal experience, but within their kingdom. Yeah, isn't that what led to the fall of Rome? Was essentially too much global expansion, and then because they didn't have the resources in order to sustain their civilization.
No. Well, I mean, maybe there's a small part there, but it was Christianity basically is what destroyed Rome. So that's what basically took out Rome. You know, when it's all said and done, was Christianity. It was the idea of no more unification of religious paganism. But I guess that's neither here nor there. But you could that's another thing you could be fighting over, just religion. What's the scarcity there?
Oh, sure.
I don't like, you know, Christian says I don't like Muslims. Muslims say I don't like Christians.
Sure.
Where's the scarcity?
I mean, obviously, that's not a scarcity of resources.
Again,
So, sure,
it
I
doesn't
can concede
have
that
to
there could be
be-
other motivations.
Yeah. It doesn't have to
So,
be all
and-
I
war.
would say that would be the main motivation, though.
Okay, and so then within any motivation, men are going to be the operators of force doctrine. They're going to be the ones
Okay.
fighting the war, right?
Okay, yeah.
So if that's the case, they're going to necessarily need authority to do that. It's a necessary condition.
It's a necessary condition with the authority.
This is my argument for why patriarchy is a necessary condition.
I mean, we can agree that, you know, the men that are fighting are not the men making decisions, right?
No, they very much are often making decisions, yes.
Really, you think that like presidents
Like Eisenhower.
are going
Grant.
to war?
Yeah, Grant went to war. Eisenhower went to war.
Oh,
I mean,
did
the list of
Trump?
presidents that went to war is insane. And the
Trump?
pipeline.
No, a lot of presidents did not go to war. Not to mention, most people in the military are just simply soldiers and followers. Most of them are not top tier generals, right? Most of them are simply just taking orders. And leadership doesn't always have to be about the actual force and the actual fighting. It's about the decision making and the war planning. So women can absolutely do those things.
And between general and president is also insane. So yeah, definitely. A lot of presidents went to war.
Sure, I would sure there are examples, but ultimately I think there are obviously like a class of people making decisions and then enacting that through a proxy of military.
What gives the president the most amount of power, though, is he's commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces. That's what gives him his primary proxy of power. That's what gives all men their primary proxy of power, is the authority over force. So the thing is,
sure,
is that
I don't disagree with that.
the difference is men can always change the conditionals for leadership and women can't. So necessarily,
I think under patriarchy, absolutely, sure.
how could they do it under matriarchy? How?
I mean, what's the ultimate goal here
For
society?
to be made. I mean, are you asking from my view, or are you asking from your view?
From your view.
Oh, well, from my view, it's simple. Just the spreading and propensity for Christian ethics in society.
Why?
Because I think people live better lives that way.
What do you mean by better lives?
Well, I would say things, we'd probably have some agreement here, right? Healthy children, healthy families, well-adjusted, lack of general degeneracy in societies, things like that.
Sure. So can you give me a little bit more specifics?
I mean, that was pretty specific. Like what?
Would you say like access to medical care?
Yeah, I think you need general access to medical care.
Yeah. Access to housing?
Yeah, in order to be healthy.
Yeah. Access to education?
Sure.
So, I mean, then we agree that the desired outcome of society would be human flourishing.
Yeah, but we have a very, very different idea of what human flourishing is.
Okay. Well, what is that for you?
So when you just talk about base things, yeah, I can agree with you that human beings, generally speaking, need to be educated to have housing, things like this, right? But these are basic needs.
Sure.
Right? But what about when you're talking about a hierarchy of needs? What happens when we get past the basic needs? What happens to civilization then?
What do you mean?
Well, okay, so let's say we all have houses.
All right. Looks like about 20 minutes or so we'll be talking to space. So keep going for a bit.
Most of us do. We have some place to live. Almost nobody in the United States is starving. Almost nobody.
Well, starving and food scarcity, I think, are two different things. 1 in 7 families rely on food banks.
Are they starving?
In terms of starving to death?
In terms of starving.
She literally just distinguished these things. Like, what's the point of this rhetoric? She literally just said starving and food scarcity are two different things. There are people who require food banks or whatever else. Well, are they starving? She just fucking distinguished the two things for you. Like, obviously there's some rhetoric here that, like, there's just something aside from caring about the truth here that is going on. Or he's just not listening to what she's saying. I mean, who knows? I shouldn't psychoanalyze people.
At all.
I guess I just don't know how I would, like, relate starving.
Yeah, so they're relying on a food bank. It's the difference between that and being relying on the state for food. The food is basically the alleviation of the ability for you to eat, right, or not eat.
Yeah, so obviously if we're going to talk about then, like, access to food, like, it would be nutritious, calorie-dense food.
Well, I mean, yes, but also
and
not
like,
prepackaged processed shit, right?
Yeah, maybe calorie-dense wasn't the right word. I meant nutritious-dense.
Yeah, whatever the nutritional standard is, we would agree. Sure.
But no, people still experience food scarcity. Like, kids go to school hungry.
No, every kid who would possibly be hungry at school has access to the school lunch program.
I mean, depending on where you live. I know where I live, school lunch is free, but not
Everywhere.
in other states.
There's no place I'm aware of where if you are under the poverty line, school lunch isn't served to you for free.
But if you are above the poverty line, then you don't have access to school lunch?
Yeah, probably not.
So do you agree with that then?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think that... so that would just be a misallocation of parental resources. So you're just misallocating resources. They're your resources. You can allocate them correctly or incorrectly. I don't see why the state needs to allocate them for you.
Well, if we're going to talk about then kind of like the dynamics of capitalism, I do think we need to acknowledge that obviously capitalism needs to create a poor class in order to exploit their labor. So, I mean, if you're poor and you only have X amount of dollars.
So does communism.
What do you mean?
Well, so do you agree with me when it comes to class that there's a such thing as social class?
I guess it would mean I guess I would need to know what you define as social class.
Academics versus laborers.
Sure, like prestige. Sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, is it going to be still in a communist society laborers to do most of the work?
Yes, but they would have access to they would own the means of production to where essentially they would have access to the materials in order to execute the labor.
Yeah.
Whereas the capitalist has access to that, so they're able to steal the surplus value.
Yeah, but then you would have academics still who would have prestigious positions of being able to determine where the things, which they now own the means of production, need to go. And so those people necessarily end up with authority. There's no way around it.
I mean, I don't think like authority and class are
let us
necessarily
pretend for a second that
like intertwined.
Let's find out.
But
let's find out.
hang
on. Let me test this real quick before I let you move on.
I just wanted to go back to the original point.
Yeah, we will.
Okay.
But just real quick, this whole table's communism, let's say. Okay. And within the confines of this whole table, every little individual industry, the workers own the means of production.
Okay.
Okay. They're all producing it all. Who gets to decide where it goes?
Well, that would be the proletariat.
The proletariat decides where it goes?
Yeah.
How?
Through democracy, through voting.
Okay, so government.
Well, again, it would depend on what you mean by government. It would just be
people in a governing body who make decisions on behalf of this they're democratically elected.
Sure,
figures.
I just want to make the delineation that it wouldn't be considered a state.
Okay, but it's a government.
Sure.
Yeah, and so necessarily the people in the government who are making the decision on where these resources go, those people are necessarily going to have to be imbued with authority.
Okay, yeah.
So if that is the case, you're always going to end up
Well,
with
the
a class
authority
society
is the democracy, right? And this is actually a pretty interesting critique on the communism thing here. I feel like I probably am leaning more into Andrew's court here as a critique on communism, because something I think that is just unfortunately part of the human project is our greedy nature. I think it stems from evolution. Like, it makes sense. We want to allocate secure resources for ourselves and our families and our offspring. So it makes sense why humans did sort of develop this kind of greediness to lock down resources. But it's just unfortunately something we just have to deal with in terms of human societies, which is why I don't actually take that leap into full-blown communism or Marxism, because as we've seen in past societies, human greed tends to take these over just as much as capitalist systems get taken over. You know, the difference being that in these Marxist societies, it's sort of a bug, not a feature, whereas capitalism, you're promoting the greediness of humanity. So, but it's like the point still holds, right? Like, somebody does have to direct orders, does have to sort of redistribute resources, whatever. Even if you have a vote, even if you have a populace democratically voting about distribution, you still have to have some class regulating this distribution and whatnot. So there is very much chance to fall into authoritarianism, greedy dictatorship. Unfortunately, just it's like none of the systems we found so far are good. So I think you can be anti-capitalist without being communist. It's not a binary, right?
The people who have authority are always going to have prestige.
Well, but it's the working people that have the authority.
No. They
Yeah,
don't
that's
get
what the proletariat is.
They don't get to determine where their resources get allocated. Somebody has to determine that. Whoever determines where the allocation of the resources go, they're the ones who are going to have
That would be
authority.
the community. The community would have the authority.
So what if the community votes then to keep all of the resources for themselves and not share them with anybody?
Okay.
There you go.
They don't have to share them?
Correct. I mean, obviously, then
That sounds an awful lot like capitalism.
how would that be capitalism?
Well, I mean, what's the difference right now between a company who has a bunch of employees and they all make a whole bunch of products and they sell all those products and they keep all the money for themselves? What's the difference between that and a group of people who own the means of production, the company, they own the company, and they
because
sell
it's
a bunch
the
of
workers
products?
keeping their own product, not the capitalist.
Workers are, what do you mean? Workers keep their product now, money.
No, they don't.
They keep a paycheck, right?
No, the product is, so if I'm a worker and my labor makes $1,000 worth of profit,
Yeah.
The capitalist pays me my hourly wage, which could be, let's just say for the day, $100, and then he keeps the 900. But in,
Where's
that's
the
like an
deep
example within
extractor?
capitalists, but within communists, like the workers own the means of production, which means there's no capitalist who owns the factory, who owns the materials.
How do
The
these
workers
people
do.
who work in these factories allocate the resources amongst each other?
Amongst each other, well, you can have democratically elected leaders, or you can have votes
So
with,
these
with the
democratically
workers.
elected leaders could democratically say these people over here do more work than me, they get more money?
Well, I mean, under communism, ideally, it would be moneyless, but I think it would just be determined like
So if it's-
if you work for if you work and produce $1,000, you get $1,000.
The
So
point
if-
is you're sort of kicking the middleman out, right? If you're producing all of this value, you should be able to sell this value for what it's worth rather than have a middleman pay you for your wages and then take your wages or take the value that you produced and sell it for its whole thing while shorting you the value. That's kind of the idea, but again, what she's missing here is that when it comes to democratically elected populace of people deciding where to redistribute, so here's a better way to put it, right? So if we have a climate crisis, for example, and we're trying to crack down on production as far as its how it's polluting and everything else, right? Its carbon footprint. In a communist society, it would require the populace to democratically vote, hey, we need to change this production. We need to change how we do this, or else we're going to have this climate crisis on our hands. So you could get to a point where the workers are like, well, no, we're not going to vote for this because that means harder work for us or less money for us, less value for us, whatever else. And so they could just keep voting no to rearrange how we produce things, and you'll just run into a climate crisis, right? So there's kind of a critique here with communism about how democratically electing every single aspect of your society can lead to very bad outcomes, which is why typically in past societies of communism, dictators have taken over because, people will vote selfishly. That's the point of democracy, is everybody gets a say on their selfish input. This is why democracies are good for electing leaders who then can be more authoritarian in what they do. Like, obviously we don't want full authoritarianism, but yeah, there's problems with making every single aspect of society democratic because people are just kind of selfish.
Your production makes $1,000, you get $1,000. Can you spend that $1,000 on getting a bigger house than somebody else?
Well, again, if we're talking about like true communists, it's moneyless. So this kind of example isn't really relative.
Yeah,
to,
but
like,
I'm failing to
principle.
see a single example you're giving me where I can't be like, well, it sounds like we could have class off of this immediately.
Well, I think class and prestige or kinship are different concepts.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing, but I'm
Okay.
talking right now about class. So it just sounds to me like if you have more resources, you would be set in a class above other people who don't have as much resources. That would be class, right?
Well, no, because you would have access to the means of productions of resources.
Yeah, well, you'd have access
no
to the
one
means
lives
of production at least where you work for resources.
Right. I mean, you could go to
But you still need fruit. And you still need bananas, right? You still need steak.
Sure,
You need
yeah.
all of these things. You need,
so
you
like
need lumber. So
like,
somebody's
for
going to have to
example, if,
decide where all that
Brazil-
shit goes, right? So that
Sure.
everybody gets it.
So then it would be, the community and I think you can do that through reason, through practicality.
Well, you can't have, you couldn't have 300 million people voting on where each individual piece of lumber
Well, it would be like individual sects of community. So obviously, like let's just say, for example, like Brazil is exporting coffee.
Yeah.
And they have a really bad coffee season.
Yeah.
Then, maybe exports don't go to countries that are farther distance, just ones that are closer because there's only so much amount that someone can get. And then, maybe
What?
someone...
That makes no sense.
What do you mean?
Well, you're still going to have central people in a central authority who would have to determine where, because when you think about resources, like just look around this room, there's cameras and monitors and plates and cups. And I mean, it's an enormous amount of resources just looking around that all need to be allocated all over the place in equity.
I mean, depending. It doesn't necessarily need to be equity based on someone's need, based on necessity.
Well,
based
everybody
on
needs
need.
plates.
Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, you have to.
So I don't necessarily
to have
say
a
there would be one
determiner.
factory in Texas that would produce all the plates within the country. You can
Yeah.
have multiple industries based in certain
But
communities.
somebody's going to have to determine where all the plates in the country go. How many does Houston
Well, the
get?
community can determine.
How? How do you determine that? How would the community?
Based on need.
So then they're going to vote on each individual shipment going to every node of the United States?
Well, again, I don't know why we're just saying that one place makes plates.
Well, that was your example.
No, I said there can be sects of.
Oh, I agree. There could be. That's even
Yeah.
worse. That just makes the problem even more complex.
How?
Well, now there's already plates going to Houston. They don't need them. What do we do with our plates? We send them over here to this guy.
Yeah, wherever there's need. I mean, I don't know why we would produce
but
something that we don't
somebody's
need.
going to make the determination of the need.
Okay.
That's the
I
point.
don't necessarily think
So there's
that
going to be
that's-
what are called middlemen. Middlemen who
Okay.
are going to make a determination on where
Sure.
resources
Do
are
I think there are going to
allocated.
be people who do administrative duties? Sure.
Yeah,
Is
those
that what we're
people are
saying?
always going to have a higher prestige than the laborers.
I don't think that's class.
That's definitely class.
It's not class.
Then why are
making decisions is not class.
if you have authority?
Authority is not class.
No.
No.
Oh, okay. So then, would you say that you have the same amount of class hierarchy as the president?
No.
Why?
Well, that's not class though. Like me and the president, those aren't class determinations.
Yes,
those
they
are
are.
authority determinations.
They are
When
class
we're talking
determinations.
about class,
Then why did you just say that you don't have the same class hierarchy as him?
I'm sorry if I misspoke. I
Uh-huh.
just want to make sure that we're understanding the delineation between class. So, yes, I do think there is a ruling class, and then there is a working class.
So in the hierarchy, where is the president to you?
It's a good question.
Probably the ruling class.
I mean, I would
Why-
say the president is essentially a part of the state, which is kind of an authoritative arm of.
This is the problem with idealizing communism and Marxism, right? Like, there's no society that functions with massive amounts of production and distribution without a structure of leadership and authority and hierarchy and everything else. Now, if you're an anarchist, then fine. You can say, we don't want a state, we don't want a leader, we want just pockets of people dictating their own means of production. Like, that's the only real consistent take you can have as a full-blown communist who claims that the goal is a stateless society. Otherwise, you have to reckon with and bite the bullets of people being in charge of redistribution, people being in charge of international relationships. There has to be some leadership. Even in the small pockets of anarchy, there's naturally going to be more of a leadership, like some people who lean more into the leadership roles and some who lean more into the follower roles. And it's just kind of part of how we organize as humans. Now, leadership doesn't have to be oppressive and super authoritative and like a good leader can be cooperative and listen to their community. And this is why we do democratic elections, right? Because we want to work with the community to get their say and their input. But there's no avoiding this idea of leadership, hierarchy, and sort of authority over decision makings in a society unless you're going for full-blown anarchy. And again, even in that, you're going to have leaders in each little pocket. So this is kind of where communism breaks apart. Doesn't mean capitalism is good. Again, I'm tired of people just putting capitalism and communism on this binary. Like we can be anti-capitalist without being communist or anarchist. There are better ways we can discover here moving forward.
Of the ruling class?
So he's higher in the hierarchy than you?
Yeah, he's an authoritative arm, sure.
Yeah. So can you give me examples of people who have authority who aren't higher in the hierarchy than you?
Of people who have authority?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean?
A person who is in a position of authority over, at least as far as a government body goes, who aren't in a higher hierarchy than you. They're not higher than you are.
I mean, I guess it would depend on what sect we're talking about.
Any. Like any sect. If they have authority, necessarily they're going to be higher.
What I'm saying is when it comes to authority, it's
you.
not necessarily central to the idea of class. Like obviously the ruling class, like do you think that people who own property have like what you would call legal authority?
Yeah.
Over people who don't have property?
No. So you would have legal authority on your property.
Sure, but I would say that having property or having capital gives you a specific type of authority that's different than, say, a structural presidential authority.
It still gives you authority. My whole point is authority. So if I have vast amounts of property that people live on, right, you would definitely put me higher in a class hierarchy than the people who lived on my property, likely.
Most productivity setups are making you feel more productive, but they're actually just wasting your time. So I got to a point where I was juggling.
So, and that's because I have authority.
Right, but authority is not just necessarily like decision-making positions. It can also be access to certain resources or capital.
Yeah, sure. But my point is that authority itself also seems to be a big position for hierarchy, for being up in the hierarchy. So what I'm saying, I guess my ultimate argument, just to reduce it very quickly, because I feel like we're circling, is just this. That necessarily, because men have the monopoly on force, they will always be appealed to for force doctrine by women. Since that's the case, you're going to have necessary authority imbued in them. And because of that, you're never going to actually have a classless society, because whoever's imbued with the doctrine of force is going to be the one who's essentially in charge of people. And that's just the way it is, descriptively.
I mean, do you think that men within this society who hold high authority are necessarily the strongest?
No.
No, so like authority isn't directly derived from force.
Yes, it is. Here's why. Because you can change the condition of who holds authority with force. And men uniquely can do that and women can't. So while it's true you could have, let's say, a woman who's in charge of a group of men, like let's say you're a second lieutenant in the United States military, you're in charge of a group of guys, right? Men can literally change the conditionals anytime they want to of their government, and women cannot. So men can always collectivize to change conditionals.
I'm sorry. So we're talking about a lieutenant in the military, and now we're talking about government conditionals?
Well, I was giving you an example of where a woman could have some kind of authority over men, right?
Sure, in terms of ranking, sure.
Yeah, sure. But only that it's because men are not challenging that authority that she's able to keep it. Men uniquely can do that and women cannot.
The point here is that even men have to collectivize to do this. Like, a man can't just, like, do this on his own. He can't just be like, this society sucks, I'm going to overthrow it. They have to collectivize with a lot of other people. And because of that, women can also join the collectivizing movement, whether they're just engineers or leaders from afar. Even some of them can fight, right? Like, we've seen this. Some of them can control drones, whatever else. Even if they're not in the trenches, they can join the collectivizing movement. Like, maybe some women agree with Andrew and they're like, yeah, let's overthrow this system to implement patriarchy back in this. In fact, there are women who agree with him. And what are they doing? They're joining the collectivizing movement with him, and they're talking online. They're writing books. His wife is writing a book and arguing with people. They're engaging in the society to try and change it. So they join the collectivizing movement. So just the fact that he's already saying you have to collectivize opens the door for women being able to join the collectivizing movement.
That's why.
So I'm sorry. Are you saying that the army can challenge her authority?
No, the president can remove her, like in a second, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. What's your point?
Well, I'm just saying that if men don't like the conditionals that they have, they can overthrow the nation they're in.
Well, if men are in that position, though, correct?
Men are always in that position, to be in the position of overthrow.
Are you talking like the president?
No, I'm talking about just general. Okay, maybe we're talking past each other. Let's back up. Inside of any nation, institution, okay, in this case, would you say a country, okay? I don't know. I guess it would depend on what you would consider a country, but I think you and I wouldn't disagree the United States is a country, right?
Sure.
Okay. If the men in the United States wanted to overthrow the rightfully elected government of the United States, they could. Women could not.
Like citizens?
Yeah. And the only thing that would defend...
I don't know about
Nope.
that.
Men would still require women in order to do that. Do you want to know why? Because women birth more men. And in order to collectively overthrow a government and sustain your own arm of enforcement, you need to keep creating more men. So, no, you can't do this all on your own. You require women to do this. You require them to birth people, to feed people, to take care of them, to raise them. Even in your own worldview, if they're stay-at-home moms who do nothing else but raise kids, you still require them first before you can collectivize as men to overthrow the government. So you need both. You can't just say that only men can do this by themselves. Men need to eat, right? They need their shit taken care of. You need women in the background doing things for you.
The United States from that would be men again. So it would be men on the defense and men on the offense, but women have never historically overthrown any government with violence ever once.
Again, like, do you think that I don't think men, citizens, could overthrow the United States government.
Maybe
just
not.
Because of,
but that's because men would be there with guns to stop them.
Well, I think
All right.
that's
Think
because
we're
of,
gonna
again,
talk
like
space
tools.
soon.
Yeah,
I'm
sure,
gonna
but
start
what
getting
I'm saying
ready
I mean,
for
do you
that.
think
The only
if
ones who
women had all the
possibly-
nukes that we...
Let's see here. Has he hit me up? Okay. All right, so I'm gonna set up the StreamYard to talk to space. Meanwhile, probably take a bathroom break.
From digging up the worms, I'm a can split open. Happy to rehearse while the people stand shoulder to shoulder and take the stage like stop. You're dragging anchors from the earth while the whole world suffers. From digging up the worms, I'm a can split open. Happy to rehearse while the people stand shoulder to shoulder and take the stage. shoulder and take the stage like stop. You're dragging anchors from the earth while the whole world suffers from digging up the worms. I'm a can split open, happy to rehearse while the people stand shoulder to shoulder and take the stage like stop. You're dragging anchors through the dirt while the whole world suffers from digging up the worms. I'm a can split open, happy to rehearse while the people stand shoulder to shoulder and take the stage like stop. You're dragging anchors from the earth while the whole world suffers from digging up the worms. I'm a can split open, happy to rehearse while the people stand shoulder to shoulder and take the stage like stop.
So I'm gonna flip over. Let me hear you.
Says, do you want me to say something like testing?
Yeah.
Testing. This is classic bullshit.
That's good. Looks like we're working. Sorry, I'm just fixing a couple things. I'm gonna play a little intro video so that I can later cut this and it'll be like a separate video from my stream.
Sounds like a fucking plan.
Alrighty. And we're also gonna backup record. We're being extra careful today.
I don't blame you. Man can never be too careful, especially without dealing with computers and shit. I'm computer illiterate, so I feel you.
Yeah, dude, I'm such a technotard. Like, I don't know. I try, but I swear I'm kind of cursed. Like, even when I just investigate and research everything, it always comes back to bite me somehow. There's kind of an echo now. I don't know what that was about.
You might have just been hearing my work radio, brother.
Oh, got you. All right.
Yeah, I've got to have my radio on because technically I'm on break and shit, and we've been having a bunch of shit happen lately. People getting shot, people getting killed, so now I just have to keep the fucking radio on break because if I don't, like some shit. This last time I didn't do that, some shit popped off, and I was like 30 minutes late to the fucking event, so can't do that again.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna put this video up and then we'll get into it.
I used to think about it madly. You want a conversation gladly, and I'm hoping oh so badly you can show me who is Scott Daddy.
All right, and we're
Is that
here.
your intro video? Is that your intro video?
That's it. That's
I like
all
it, I
me,
like
dude.
it. It worked.
Could you tell it was
works.
me?
Yeah. I mean, kind of like I can, but either way, it's a good fucking intro video. It definitely sticks in the brain.
So my my YouTube name used to be Who is Sky Daddy, and so that's like why it ends like that. But I decided to change the name to be just more, I don't know, embracing of people who don't like the term Sky Daddy and stuff. But I feel like the song still fits.
It does.
Anyway, yeah, appreciate you coming. Unfortunately, last time, I don't know for anybody listening, we had a whole ass conversation last week, and at the very end, we recognized our sound wasn't working, and it was a whole ordeal. But I appreciate you coming back. It means a lot to me. Do you want to like introduce however you want to introduce yourself and let people know what you're about?
Yeah, Internet handle Space Apache. It's been an internet handle for a few years now, but either way, like in real life, I'm a lot of things, so the list would be pretty long, but I guess the biggest issues about me personally, cult survivor, veteran, former private military contractor, currently law enforcement, SRT, gang investigator, narcotics investigator. Done a lot of crazy stuff in my life. Wasn't the best kid in the world. Survived a lot of crazy shit. And It's shaped the way I view the world. As a result, I've become a person who is incredibly what I call realistic. I try to view the world as it really is, for all the harshness and beauty that it contains. And in that harshness, I found a lot of beauty. Like, an environment that's constantly trying to kill you has a beauty that is hard to describe. Like, I love the desert, for example, jungle environments, the desert. There's something about that really, really harsh environment that is just stunningly beautiful. And it really makes you feel alive when you realize that everything around you wants you dead, right? And that's the way life, I don't know, I think there's something to be valued there. And I think if you, as a person, if you go through a lot of trauma, I think there is, maybe this might be a helpful way to view the world, to take some appreciation and just accept it as it is. But that's pretty much me.
So, I agree with you on the tragedy, the beautiful tragedy of life, right? This is like a huge aspect to like ancient tragedy poetry and stuff like that, is kind of like getting at the same thing. Is like beautiful is related to what is tragic, essentially. So I'm glad you brought that up. I'm curious, and if you don't want to like get all into your past and whatnot and do like interviewee type stuff, just let me know. We can get into whatever. But
doesn't matter to me.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter to
I'm
me at
super
all.
curious what this cult thing is and what you survived here.
So, it was an independent Pentecostal cult. Broke off from, if anybody Googles it, the Gospel Assembly series of churches under this guy that used to be called Brother Jolly back in the day. I got to spruce up for this interview, polish my teeth, get it just ate.
Yeah, you're good.
What happens when you eat Chick-fil-A? It gets in your fucking beard and shit. So, either way, a long time ago, this guy, well, basically at the turn of the 20th century, roughly, this cult got started. It ended with this guy. Well, not really ended, as far as I know, it's still going. Probably the most prominent leader was this guy called Brother Jolly. He was, they're very much independent Pentecostals. They teach some extreme shit, like end of the world, fire, death, hell, and brimstone shit. Incredibly restrictive. And that wasn't restrictive enough, right? Like, so a member of them, who became our cult leader, broke off and started his own thing under the same thing, and basically became even more extreme. Like the cult we grew up in, me and my brother grew up in, you couldn't, for example, traditional Pentecostal stuff, short hair, no beards, women with dresses and yada yada. But they even went more extreme. You couldn't date, you couldn't buy a car, buy a house, go on vacation without approval from the minister. You couldn't really do anything. My parents, it was incredibly restrictive. Like you couldn't even date. Like there was no such thing as dating. There was only courting. You had to be married to the church.
Damn.
And probably the most damaging aspect of it is that if you leave the church, you're dead to the family. That means they treat you like you're dead. They never interact with you ever again. And this basically forces people to stay, because also social interaction outside the church is banned. So you don't go to like festivals or events. We didn't have TV, internet, or music that wasn't produced by the church, right? So as a result, just lack of exposure to the outside world. And you're like, well, you can go out into the world or you can stay here with everybody you know. Most people choose to stay.
Yeah.
And the people who got into it was our parents. Our parents got into it because they had, being from where I'm from Mississippi, my family has a long history of criminality, and because that's how we survived for the past literally 1,000 years. For 1,000 years, we've done all kinds of crazy stuff. But long story short, my parents were just trying to make a better life, which they genuinely thought they were. Both of them thought they needed God. Both of them had issues. They thought they needed God. They were trying to be good people. They come across this church. Everybody in the church seems to be good people. They kind of overreacted to their previous lives. You know what I mean? Overcompensated. And the thing about cults is they're not going to tell you they're a cult, right? It's very open. Like, just do as you wish. We'll be here for you. And then eventually you just keep doing more and more stuff with them. And then they become your life. And then they use social pressure to keep you there.
Yeah.
And this went on until I was about 16. It got really bad. I had 2 suicide attempts before I was 16. My brother had 1. It was really bad. And my dad, about the time we became like 14, 15 years old, my dad had already largely turned against the church, but he didn't know how to get out of it at the time because my mom was still very much dedicated. So he didn't want to break up the family. He also didn't want to leave. And he was a deacon in the church by that time. And he realized what was going on with it. So basically, he tried to tear it apart from the inside, which ended effectively. Eventually, the church, but essentially the minister did it to himself. But my pops definitely helped. Eventually, he helped bring down the whole thing. And this particular cult leader lost both his churches and everybody involved. And I guess he kind of redeemed himself in that way, right? In a lot of ways, like he brought the system down or helped bring it down.
Yeah.
And after that, just like normal life. And it's really bad. It's really hard. I'll end with this. It's really hard to adjust to normal life. After being like the 90s do not exist for me and my brother. The 90s and early 2000s do not exist. Even though we lived in them, we did not live in them with the rest of the world, right? They do not exist as far as we're concerned. We read about it like a history, even though we were alive during that time. It's very hard to adjust back to the world. And the people who adjusted and who have to adjust back were a bunch of fucking drug using metalheads, right?
Yeah.
And hanging out with basically inner city thugs, rich white boys who didn't want to be rich white boys, and fucking just drug users from both environments, hanging out, liking music. And these people welcomed us better than normal citizens did. Regular people looked at us like we were freaks. These people looked at us like we were, oh yeah, you're broken like us. Let's hang out.
Yeah.
And if it hadn't have been for those people, like it might have been really bad because both of us were in a pretty bad psychological state at the time.
Yeah, dude. Honestly, like it's interesting. You look at a lot of music movements and like cultural movements, like you said, metal. There's like emo and punk and shit. A lot of this, at least from my experience, did stem from pretty aggressive, like getting raised pretty aggressively in a religion first, and sort of pushing you into this mode of rebellion or emo shit, right? Whatever kind of phase you go into, and the drug use is part of that as well. But the thing about it is, like, the communities themselves are very welcoming. It is like, it's the whole misfit thing. It's like, you know, nobody's correct
Absolutely.
here, so everybody's welcome type of thing.
Yeah, it's one of those wild things. Like, I had some of the best times of my life there. Those people, I've always had a soft spot in my heart for people like that. They're not bad people. They're trying. Like, I think they're deeply misunderstood by a lot of society. And I think we have more understanding these days because people are getting educated about like psychology and shit. But a lot of times these people are still relatively misunderstood. Like,
yeah.
And some of them, like out of that friend group, most of them are dead now for a variety of reasons, either getting shot. And bad thing about it is, except for the rich kid, like everybody was trying to escape poverty. And so, and this influenced me later in my job I'm in now. But nobody wakes. Well, some of them ended up dead, getting shot. Some of them, a couple of them overdosed. Some of them were murdered by family members. And you end up, a couple of them ended up just in like really bad addicts. And the thing about it is, addiction and drugs is one of my major things that I care about, because I'm not going to go into it, but nobody wakes up saying I want to be a crackhead, right? Yeah. It doesn't happen. Like, you become a crackhead due to a variety of other reasons. Like, nobody's like, yeah, can't wait to be a crackhead, bro. Like, no, it doesn't work that way.
Well,
like, and I think the way we treat drugs, and even though I'm a narcotics officer and stuff, the way we treat drugs is absolutely abominable.
Yeah.
And part of the reason I don't mind doing this job. I know I'm hurting people. Some of them that don't deserve it. Mostly we do gang stuff. So, like, there's a difference when it comes to gangs, in my opinion. You picked up a gun, I picked up a gun, it's a game, right? Sometimes we'll snatch up other people in the process. I don't like it, but the way I look at it is I'm gaining experience, because if I ever do go for public office or anything, I want to be able to suggest policy for the drug war and not have it based on some far left ideology from somebody who doesn't understand reality, or for some far right wing nut job who believes they're all fucking go to hell. Fuck them all. You know what I'm saying? Like, there needs to be a realistic approach.
Yeah, drugs is a hard one, I think, because, I mean, there's a reason why our media is like, you know, no big deal really for the white businessman going to Wall Street doing coke with all these women, right? Like, that's cool, that's exciting, like, but then the crack drug addict, it like on the street, the one doing crack on the street, this is like bad, poverty, send him to jail. Like there's just a difference in class when it comes to drugs, and people get treated differently depending on their class. The drug itself, crack, right? Like it's literally cocaine just made cheaper, and it's less
with some other stuff added. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So it's just I feel like class is a huge part even of drug use itself. You know, you mentioned a lot of these people you rolled around with were trying to escape poverty and stuff, and there's kind of this, no one just desires to be a crackhead right out the gate. Like there's some type of pressure that's like compelling them to go that direction. But and this is where I struggle a little bit with, like, I understand your position as an officer and everything else, and your goals, what you're doing, but I struggle a little bit with I guess just the idea of being a narcotics officer, but also recognizing how like this is basically class warfare. I don't know. What do you think about
that? As a pragmatist or a realist, whatever you want to fucking call me, some people just gotta die. Like that's the reality of the world. Some people just gotta die. We can't save everybody. Sometimes in order to save more people, you have to hurt people in the short term. That's not great, and people are gonna hate me for that opinion or whatever, but it's reality. Like we do it every fucking day. The people that hate me, you're sitting here on a goddamn cell phone or a laptop that was produced most likely with lithium from a fucking 15-year-old African kid dying in a fucking mine somewhere. The people listening to this who would judge me, you're perfectly fucking willing to let other people die for your benefit. You do it every day. The difference is I do it with my own bare hands and they do it from a distance. Okay? We all do it. Yep. Now the difference is what's the end goal? My end goal is to eventually hope to end this system. All right? Their end goal, well, not everybody, but obviously there's a lot of people whose end goal is like passivity. They don't fucking care. As long as they don't have to see the blood or hear the people screaming, they don't give a fuck. They say they give a fuck. Maybe they post about it on Facebook, but they don't actually do anything. Mm-hmm. I want to do something in the future. And I'm working actively toward that. So fuck them.
Yeah. And I would say that I agree with pretty much everything you said, which is why I'm not full ACAB as well, right? Like, I'm not full anything. Like, I feel like once you start getting into these absolutist categories, you're in trouble, right? You got to be flexible to your environment and what's going on. But I would say same thing for like these middle class, like white people on their phone. It's not just white people, but that's just the easiest way to describe it. But I would almost say that they're in the same camp as that crack addict in the sense that I don't think they really came out the gates of like, oh, I just want to spend my life rotting in front of a TV and going to work every day. And
of course they did. No.
But we sort of get caught up in this class system that's designed to like kind of keep us in separate categories. And the TV's comfortable, our phone's comfortable, we get lost in it, just like the crack addict.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It is. Nobody wants to be a passive piece of shit. They just end up being a passive piece of shit because society forces them to be a passive piece of shit. Like, it is what it is. That's just the reality. And, man, it's harsh. Very few people are like, I want to be the bad guy. You know what I'm saying? Very few people are like that. They may accept themselves as the bad guy, but they don't. Very few people are like, yeah, I just want to be an evil person.
Yeah.
Maybe a few billionaires. And by the way, funny what you said about crack. I have legitimately watched a billionaire smoke crack from a fucking can. Yes.
Wow. What's the point of a billionaire not? Yeah, why wouldn't you just get the purest shit at that point? That doesn't even make sense.
He said the crack hits faster and lasts longer. I'm like, okay. This is a dude worth $1 billion smoking crack from a fucking Coke can. Okay? Like, it's wild.
That is.
These people at top of society, the only difference between them and a crackhead on the street is they have money for fucking rehab and to dress up their addiction. That's it.
And they have money for the court system, right? So, yeah, and this reminds me a little bit of what you said something last year. Oh, shit. Oh, my light just went off. Whatever. Last week you were saying that basically whenever someone thinks they're a good person, right, that ultimately can just justify any bad shit because you think you're in the good. So it just reminded me of that because you were saying how Sorry, that light really threw me off for a second.
You're good, bro. You throw me off too. Shit.
Yeah. But yeah, basically, so like nobody is dying to be the bad guy, right? In my opinion, most people end up being the bad guy because they actually think they're the good guy, which is why it reminded me of you saying that. So I wanted to ask, like, do you think that your experience with the cult, the way you were raised in that cult, sort of determines your outlook on this idea of like, you hate anyone who thinks they're good? Not hate, I shouldn't say hate, but like you hate this idea of someone thinking they're in the moral good or having God on their side or whatever else. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that definitely influenced it. Every one of those people in that church, molesting kids, stealing money, laundering money, involved in everything they were involved in. Every one of them said they were a good person. Every one of them justified. I think when you start saying I'm a good person, that's some sinus pressure. So when you say you're a good person, that good person, logically, anything a good person does is good. That's why they're a good person. And I think that a lot of people, they come to this, they want to believe they're a good person, and most people want to see themselves as a good guy, and everybody engages in some degree of justification. And I do it too. Trust me, I do it too. Like, I think the difference really comes down to self-awareness. You have to be self-aware. If you're not self-aware, I think you're going to make some major mistakes. And anybody who, like I said, anybody says they're good, I believe that like they begin to justify everything they do, because if a good person is good, because what they do is good, so what I'm doing is good, right? It follows. It always follows. So I've had people sit in front of me and tell you I'm a monster, right? And they are some of the people I would rather deal with. I've had people sit in front of me and tell me I'm a monster, and they legitimately were monstrous individuals, right? I've had a contact with all types of humanity doing what I do, and the ones I am most wary of are always the ones who tell me they're good people. That's, I think it's like a nice guy. You know the nice guy thing? Everybody's aware of that now. The nice guy. I'm a good person is the same equivalent to me as the saying I'm a nice guy.
Yeah.
Okay? That is a red flag for me immediately. Most of the time.
Well, and it kind of goes into that absolutism type of thinking again, right? Because I think you can consider yourself to be decent and trying to be good, right? But it's when you get into that camp of like, no, like I am the best person here for the, like, I am the leader of the church, like I have God on my side, like all of these things to justify anything you want, essentially. And especially if you view morality as some type of divine command, if you think that you're in contact to the divinity itself, then it's basically you commanding whatever your desires are. And by the way, which is why I think the reason there's so much sexual repression in a lot of religions is because it's related to this cult leader mentality of gaining all of the like virgins or the sex for yourself. You're like repressing people's natural way of being so that you can sort of occupy that and take it over yourself.
Yeah, exactly. It also serves sexually frustrated people to look for an opportunity to release that sex, and then when they're given permission to release it by a leadership figure, they tend to. And there was a point in the church where the minister told the men not to have sex with their wives because you should only have sex for procreation.
Right.
Luckily, my dad didn't do that. I know my dad. That motherfucker didn't follow that shit. But a lot of the other men did. And then surprise, surprise, the minister ended up fucking their wives,
exactly.
right?
Yep.
Like, yeah, that's because what happened is, and by the way, this minister had like a master's degree in psychology back in like the 80s, 90s, and 70s, back when nobody knew shit about psychology. They weren't educated like people are today about psychology, right? He had a master's degree in it, so he knew how to manipulate people. He was naturally charismatic. And so, yeah, he understood the psychology of that. You sexually repress people, their sexual tension builds, right? And then they're given permission to release that sexual tension by the guy they see as a link to God.
Exactly.
So if God wants it, it must be good. Which threw me into this wild thing, so I won't name her, but there was a girl in our church I grew up with, right? I used to have a big crush on her. And after the church, she ends up, apparently as the church was falling apart, she was reaching mid-teens. And her best friend used to invite her over to her house. It was after the church fell apart, she got invited over to this girl's house. And this girl's dad was also a minister, right? and I'm pretty sure it started before she was 18, but this guy was like in his 30s. And like, this is why I have some weird views on like how we do. Some people are predatory from an early age. Let's put it that way. Some people are just predatory from an early age. And being in law enforcement, I have witnessed people who were just, when they were 12, they were predators, right? They were born to be predatory. And she's one of them. All right. She's just one of them. This girl grew up in a church where there was no allowed sexual contact, yada, yada. But when she was like 16 or whatever, she started going over to this friend's house. And this is after the church fell apart, and washing this dude's feet. That was one of the things. She had service to God was to wash his feet, right? And later her friend recounted how basically she should have realized that from the time she was 16 to 18, this girl was basically hitting on her dad, right? And then a few weeks after her 18th birthday, apparently his wife got a text message to come to, way I heard it, come to the church, to the thing. And his wife catches him and her in bed together, essentially. And then of course, he divorces his wife. They end up getting married. And I remember she posted on Facebook, it is God's will. If God had not willed it, we would not be together. Yep. And she goes, I am a good person. If God had not, she said, I am a good, God-fearing person. If God had not willed it, we would not be together. And that just drives that is insane.
Well, and that's another aspect of it too. The whole like having divinity on your side is, the thing is, we're all subject to fate. I'm not saying fate as in this was all predetermined and all pre-planned, but none of us can like rewind the clock and change things. But when you have divinity on your side, right, you start saying, well, this is how fate was supposed to be. But fate is like actually a really good tool for like just dealing with any circumstances you're up against, right? Like, this is another Nietzschean thing. I don't know if you said you like read him or just sort of looked up videos, but one of his basic messages is to love fate. And whatever she brings you, like death, destruction, love, beauty, whatever it's brought to you, you should just love it because you can't change it. And so I get frustrated at the hijacking of that idea to like, again, just justify your own actions. Like that's not really fate at that point. That's your actions as a willing being.
So I think that, so you know the term, God wills it. I think I like bar roughly translate to God wills it, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
There's the way I like to think of it, there's an active, I have a personal belief in God, whatever. I don't force anybody, don't expect anybody to accept it. I don't form my worldview necessarily around it, but I do have a personal reason to believe. At a would never argue with anybody. I think it's pointless to argue it. But I think I've thought about this. There's an active and passive voice when you say God wills it. It can be used in two ways. The active God wills it is, if I do it to you, God willed it. Right? I'm his messenger. Right. His act. He loves me. What I do to you is right because God willed it. Right?
Yeah.
And the more passive form is where I think it's more psychologically helpful and probably just more realistic. Is when, like you said, bad things happen to you. You're like, God wills it. That's God wills it, right?
Exactly.
Like this gives, like, believe it or not, the path. What you see among Islamists a lot is there is definitely the active use of the form, right? But there's a lot more of the passive use, right? And that allows them to have extreme, like human beings with no care for their own survival, dedicated to a goal with everything in their heart, right, are insanely powerful. And that's just part of the reason we lost in Afghanistan. Part of the reason we didn't succeed as much as we wanted to in Iraq. Part of the reason the Iraq-Iran war ended the way it did. In the Iraq-Iran war, there are accounts of women strapping bombs to themselves and their children as the Iraqis rolled toward them and walking hand in hand saying, God wills it, into the treads of fucking tanks. All right, that is a power that is almost unimaginable.
Yeah.
From a simple belief. And it's mind-blowing. It's fucking wild. And I think that's the difference. The people who say God wills it because I did it, right? They tend to be significantly less powerful than the people who are like, God wills it because it happened, right? Because what's happening to me is part of this. And like those people who say God wills it because I do it tend to be the first ones to break and run, in my opinion. Like what I've witnessed in life, they tend to be the ones to break and run. The people who are like passively like God wills it tend to be the people who are standing at the end of the day, in my experience anyway.
You know, I just thought of this. I wasn't actually planning on going here with you, but I think it'll be a cool point of contention for us. Because you're very like, I don't want to say aggressive, but you're very like, put your foot forward, like assert yourself onto the world, right? Like the Nietzschean idea, the will to power, like you want to do something, you want to gain power, change things for the better as you see it. And you sort of, it seems like you critique passivity quite a bit. And so for me, it's hard to put it, but essentially I operate with both mechanics. It's kind of like a Taoist type of framework, right? There's absence and there's presence, there's fullness, there's emptiness, and these things are connected. They don't exist without each other. And so I sort of operate on this idea of like, yes, I will to power, but also like sometimes being passive is the appropriate thing for my will to do.
Environmental. It's environmental demands. Environmental demand. You're absolutely correct. There are times to be when somebody dies and you can't prevent it. Like it's something you can't change. You have to accept it. You have to be passive. Obviously there are limits to that, right? Like,
Yeah.
like certain people died around me. I would not be passive about that at all. So I mean, obviously we all have a little bit of hypocrisy, and that's mine. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. Like it just depends on the situation. Sometimes you need to be passive about the things you can't control, in my opinion, and aggressive about the things you can control.
Well, I think I would take it a little bit further than just the sort of accepting fate thing. Even just asserting my will onto the world, I choose to be passive about sometimes. There are like certain
definitely.
things. Yeah. And so this for me, like, and we can get into values versus like honor system versus like a value system or whatever else. But at least for how I work with my values and my virtues or whatever else is practicing this restraint. Like I do recognize that I'm not always a good person. And so I have to actively restrain myself from putting my will onto the world, right?
So I consider that self-awareness, and I can also call it picking your battles. When I was younger, I had like this burning in my heart, right? Like this, I could feel like, I used to think of it as flames eating my soul, right? That's the way I've really felt inside. A lot of hatred, a lot of anger, a lot of rage, and it pushed me to do things that I shouldn't. That was unusual. Things survive stuff that probably shouldn't have survived. But at the end of the day, as you get older, I agree with you 100%. You begin to realize that fire only burns so bright for so long, right? You either burn out and die, or you learn to manage it. And you only have so much energy. That fire only has so much energy. So if you apply it to everything and you fight everything and everybody you can, you're just going to lose. You're spreading yourself thin like a battlefield, right? You can't spread yourself too thin. You should focus on the things you can change 100%. Like,
yeah,
there's lots of battles you can fight, and you might just choose not to. Absolutely. Like I think that is perfectly rational and reasonable. 100% agree.
The restraint part is, I think this is more. I think it's more than that, is what I'm getting at. The restraint part specifically is like, like basically I could just go get booze and drugs and like go pick fights all day. Like I could assert my will that way, but I don't but the reason I don't isn't always clear to me, I guess. It seems like there's just something that I believe that like this system transcends me, is beyond me to a degree, that I'm like pursuing a good path, quote, good. Like I'm pursuing something better than what my innate sort of biological desires tell me to pursue.
So yeah, that's where we might disagree a little bit, but I don't. It's not disagreement like we're gonna intellectually fight over it. Disagreement about like maybe how we live things. I feel when you're doing that, this is probably some part of you telling you this is not, what I'm about to do is not exactly beneficial. Um, I think we all have two or three voices in us. The one that actively wills, the one that calculates subconsciously is like, yo, you probably don't want to do that shit. And you're not even, maybe not even be aware of it, but maybe that's what's kicking in there, in my opinion. The thing that's calculating toward your end goals at whatever subconscious level, intuitive level. And then there's the voice in your head that craves just biological release of whatever we want to at the moment. And I think, I think that makes sense to me. I think that we obviously may do things quite a bit differently, but I think it's probably your innate voice, man. Your innate voice telling you, like, yo, like this long-term calculations tells this won't work out. So fuck off. That's what my opinion is. And besides, if we did that, I don't know, man. I've known people that did that, and it just tended not to end well. But here's an idea, by the way. Since the last time you and me talked, not here, but on Discord, yada yada. I have shifted my opinion on something you're probably definitely going to disagree with me on.
Let's hear it.
I have shifted from pro-choice to pro-life.
Damn. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
We might have
So-
to just fight about that the rest of the time.
Yeah. So, can I tell you why?
Yeah, please lay it out.
So we've talked about the birth rate issues in the world, yada yada. And I was very much of the mind that maybe we could shift this through policies like encouraging births through financial means, yada yada. Because in America, it primarily seems to be financial. But there's some new studies that were released that indicate that 55% of Gen Z Americans do not intend to have children at all. 55%. Of the remaining 45%, half of them plan to have one child. Half plan to have one child. These are extinction level birth rates. All right? Like, this is extinction level birth rates without some action. Okay? And I'm a pragmatist. And I'm a feminist, and I really honestly believe like a matriarchy would be better for the world, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
'Cause what you don't see in matriarchies is a lack of birth rates, by the way.
Exactly.
Matriarchies always have plenty of fucking kids.
Yep.
Because women generally want to have children, especially when they're in control of their own shit. But in this context, we can't do that right now. I really want to, and I think we can move toward that, but it's, we're going to be, that's going to be an uphill fight. And B, we don't have the time. And so I've come to the opinion that we should probably restrict abortions to 6 weeks or less. Now, I'm not like the Republicans. I'm not like, push them out and let them die, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, push them out, let that baby better work in the factory. Like, I'm not like that shit. So, in my opinion, we have plenty of funds available for this. We could cut back our military budget, because it's out of fucking whack anyway. And if we don't have soldiers for the military, we're fucked anyway. Like, I don't care how robots are expensive and AI is expensive. Like, the good human flesh and blood and bone is still really fucking cheap. Like,
Yep.
And at the end of the day, just from a national security perspective, we need babies. And so I think if you did this, you restricted abortion rights and you passed a law that you will be punished if you engage in one. What you need to do at that point is you need to set up two systems. One system for the unwanted children that mothers won't want, right? That don't want to take care of them. Expand a government-funded, government-facilitated training program for the unwanted children. And B, the next thing you do is you have to pay for that woman's medical bills, total fucking coverage across the board. 2, pay for her if she chooses to keep the child. That child receives a stipend from the government, all right, every year, unless her income is too high. I know Republicans aren't a fan of that, but fuck you at this point. B, this is one that really pisses off even people especially people on the right, but even some people on the left. We should pay for reconstructive surgery. All right, if that woman has that child, it does a lot of damage to their body. I would facilitate up to $8,000 to $13,000 per woman for reconstructive surgery if she wants any after the birth of that child, whether it be weight loss, plastic surgery for the belly, repair that devastated vagina. Like, doesn't matter to me, right? Just like so much money to get your body back to what it was before, because it's an extremely traumatic process.
Yep.
And then as far as the children and the facilities goes, well, guess what makes good soldiers? People with no families. Trauma and people with no families.
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest here. Like, unfortunately, that's the fucking
Sounds
truth.
like you're coming from experience again.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Like these guys, these kids are gonna be angry, bro. They're gonna be fucking angry, man. Not gonna lie to you. My mom abandoned me and ended up in a government training facility. Fair enough. But what I would do is facilitate these kids with the goal of them becoming, doing something for our government, right? Military, some type of service. It doesn't have to be military. It could be road work or construction or whatever they fucking want to do, right? And if they don't want to do that at the end of it, let them fucking go into the world of their own free will. But set it up so they have a continued government employment program after that. That's how I would handle it.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot here. So, just a couple of things to try and get out of the way if we can. So, as a matter of defense, that seems to be one of your concerns. The other concern is just the extinction of humanity. Is that fair? Those two things.
Yeah, like from a national security perspective, I want to preserve the country, but secondly, just for no total humanity, this seems to be if this is Gen Z in America, if this is Gen Z around the world,
Right.
We're fucked. We're fucked.
Okay, so defense-wise first, if this is a global trend, then defense-wise, ultimately, are we really going to be getting invaded if other countries are dealing with the same thing?
That depends. Long term, at the end of the century, Africa will be the most populous continent on the planet. The majority of the human population will be African. All right, they will probably run the world, and that's not a bad thing. The issue is we can't predict what those nations will do. Right. So maybe they become more aggressive. Maybe they become more peaceful. We don't fucking know. Like, that's a century from now. Anything could happen. You know what I mean? Aliens could land, or there could be the ground could open up and demons crawl out. We don't fucking know what's going to happen. We can't predict how these nations will evolve, and they will likely be the most populous with a relatively young population, even at the end of the century, their current birth rate. Even though their current birth rate is in decline, they will while they'll still be in decline, and eventually they will suffer the same fate as everybody else. It'll be about a century later, right? So for about a century, they will be peak, and we don't know how they'll develop. In the case of Russia, UK, France, Germany, Vietnam, China, we kind of know the rough trajectories and desires of these nations. We don't know what these nations, the new power of the planet will do. So as far as defense is concerned, I don't think we'll be invaded, but there's a non-zero chance that we will.
Okay. So the extinction part is probably more important anyway. So I listen to debates about this shit all the time. Like, I'm too obsessed with it. It probably drives me mad. But so I'm hearing these arguments from right-wing, basically fascists. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to actually identify. Yeah. But it is like a global trend. These are true. This is true stuff. So it's like nothing I can deny about birth rates going down. However, what I'm always thinking when I listen to this stuff is, how have we determined how many people we need before we go extinct? Because to me, what it looks like societies as we've built them could definitely collapse with these birth rates dropping. That's probably inevitable if the birth rates continue the way you're suggesting. But does that actually mean human societies?
Not me. The studies are suggesting.
Yeah. But does collapse of the societies we've built as we know it equal humans going extinct? Or will humans, as life does, sort of grab at the chance to live off the land and have more kids and start repopulating? In fact, as I'm not like a full Marxist or full communist. I call myself a pluralist progressive because I like taking principles from all of the systems that I read, like good principles from any system I can find. A lot of them are Marxist and stuff, but if the idea is to sort of have a stateless, moneyless society, would not the collapse of the society be good in progress toward that, in which pockets of communities can now just start regulating their own little communities, having kids? And I don't think this means humans go extinct, is what I'm getting at.
So Long term, it definitely does. So there's recent studies, this is pretty accurate, it's not even really up for much debate, it's well accepted in the scientific community that large mammalian life on Earth has at max about 1 million years. Okay? And people are like, who cares what happens in 1 million years? I can hear everybody and watches this like, who cares what happens in 1 million years, right? Well, reality is, I have a very long-term view of the world, the universe, yada yada. 1 million years is that, and the cosmic sense. 1 million years ain't shit. Basically, we have very limited amounts of time. B, before the sun cooks us, the surface of the planet, well enough to destroy all mammalian life, climate change will almost certainly have fundamentally altered the surface of our planet. Even if it's not in the short term, right? Even if it's like a few hundred years from now. And this whole birth rate thing will take place over the course of roughly 300 years, okay? And we're going to see the peak of human birth around 2050. And from there, we're going to see a decline. So I'm giving, and you look at it, factor Africa in, you got another century. And then after that, I guess something else will happen. Probably take another century. I'm guessing 300 years. But at these birth rates, you can talk to doctors. You can watch some of Dr. Shauna Swan's takes on this and some other takes from people like Harvard, MIT. The reason we call these extinction level birth rates is because eventually you end up in somewhat of an extinction spiral where each generation has successively fewer children to the point that they can't repopulate. They can't repopulate. And I'll also remind you that if you said society would collapse and people go agrarian, this is true. I have a question for you. Do you know that the death rate of females from natural births throughout human history? How many of them die in childbirth?
I know it's high. Without like hospitals and medicine, yeah.
30 to 50%. All right. Now, what do you think that's going to be in the developed nations? Even most of the undeveloped nations like Vietnam, Korea, yada, yada. What do you think that's going to be then? Because there's another factor we haven't thought about, and this is C-sections. And you can actually find write-ups about this. C-sections have altered evolution. So we used to be the women with short hips and small vaginal canals were narrow hips and small vaginal canals would just die. Okay, unfortunately that was the case. They'd bleed out and die, and it was rough. But it meant that women with larger hips and larger vaginal canals and yada yada, everything to help them have a baby tended to survive and pass on their genes. We have circumvented this by doing C-sections, and I'm not against C-sections. 2 of my kids are born with C-sections. So C-sections are fucking great, right? I don't want to lose my wife. But if society collapses, there's a very solid chance that the birth rate among females is going to be even higher. Okay, and when you're dealing with a population, we're only 45% of them are going to have a kid, right? And then half of those women, at a minimum, that's the highest of the natural birth rates. And I'm assuming that after this evolutionary take will conclude even more. When 50% or more die in childbirth with their first child, then we have a severe problem. Okay, after societal collapse, and when this cuts down on the birth rate even more, which means the next generation suffers the same problems pretty rapidly. Maybe we could come out of the extinction spiral. We've been down to 35,000 humans before, but all of civilization will collapse at that point. All of civilization. And B, we can't get back into space. Satellites will degrade. Things will fall apart in space. You'll end up with a massive whipping ball of metal around the planet that would keep us from going into space for 10,000 years, possibly 10,000 years. There's a lot of models of that type of event. And then you're on top of that, like as people collapse and societies collapse, you've got like chemical storage facilities on waterways that will break and leak incredibly toxic materials. Lake Karachay in Russia might breach, almost certainly will at some point, with nuclear waste, and that will pour out into the Arctic Ocean, poisoning most of Europe. Like without proper human maintenance, the planet becomes toxic. And then even if we somehow survive all of that, our civilization has consumed so many fucking resources like oil that our future following generations, since society collapse, will likely not have the ability to extract enough energy to rebuild the society that we currently live in, which means that we'll probably be stuck here, when the sun cooks the surface of the planet in 1 million years, or climate change wipes us out in 500,000, right? We're fucked long term. And I think very, very long term in these contexts. And so I think all of that suffering and death is worth restricting personal freedoms for a little while. Hopefully for a little while.
So when it comes to the climate change point, do you agree that, like, I know climate change has its natural course without humans, but do you think that humans have exponentially added to the course of the changing climate? I would hope so.
Definitely.
Because you're
It
a
definitely
very
looks that way.
scientific guy, yeah.
It definitely looks that way. I've heard some debate about it, but it definitely looks that fucking way.
Because I guess that, just this point alone, obviously all of this stuff's interdependent and connected and stuff, but if we could try to just look at that point alone as best as we can, right, that one seems like a double-edged sword to me, right? We keep mass producing people who keep needing to consume more resources and especially massive amounts of energy to get to space and stuff, right? Are we actually going to beat the sun before we cook the planet ourselves?
Fuck, no, that's the problem, man. You are absolutely fucking correct. I've thought about that too. My only answer, like, I'm not a guy with all the answers. I'm just a guy who views things a little bit more longer range than most people. But I don't have these fucking answers.
Yeah.
In reality, the way I view it, we're very much in a race against time. So we have a few things that would change the course of this trajectory. We have the potential development of fusion technology that is coming along very, very well right now. But it could be 5 years away. It could be 50. We really don't know. Fusion is some weird shit. We have hot salt thorium reactors being built by Chinese. And my opinion is, this is my personal opinion. So for the record, I said this in 2025, right? My personal opinion is that the Chinese will likely, once they have theirs up and operating, start building these hot salt thorium reactors across the planet for their allied nations, and then likely use this as a mechanism of control, because thorium cannot be used in nuclear weapons, and it's insanely cheap, and it's everywhere. All right. China has 60,000 years worth of thorium in its mineral deposits, so they could give thorium reactors to every allied nation, and then be like, "Yo, don't do what we tell you to do." Lights off. Right?
Yeah.
That's what I would do in their situation. I'm not gonna lie to you. That's what I would do. Do what I want, or I'm gonna turn your power off. Right?
Yeah.
And so when it comes to this, I think if we go down the hot salt thorium reactor and nuclear technology route, which we seem to be doing kinda, like until Trump took office and he cut a whole bunch of funding in that area, by the way. But we were developing like micro nuclear reactors, like Constellation Energy, by the way, have stock in them. Check Constellation Energy out, but they were doing like micro nuclear reactors and shit. I think that if we get the technology up and running fast enough, then, and we use like potentially like nanoparticles in the upper atmosphere to shield the planet, which is something that's been talked about by multiple organizations. If we use the right technology, we could sustain. You're right. We're fucked. We keep raising the population. We will face resource demands we cannot fulfill. But if the population falls like it currently is, we face extinction and collapse of society. And then, like you said, it's very much going to be threading the needle.
Yeah.
But I think that if possible, if our technology advances fast enough, we can support more people. If we can support more people, we can keep the economy alive. We keep the economy alive, we can afford space travel. And once we have space travel, it opens up the economy, period. Like, we have an infinitely growing economy at that point, and space relatively infinite. And then B, we can support just more people. So hopefully, like, we'll have to thread the needle, but you're right, it's competing interests, man. It's really like, how, like, I don't know, man, it's hard to explain. It's a complex,
Well, it's a
complex
double-edged
problem.
sword. That was kind of my whole point, right? And so this is like, I might get a bit deeper here than you really, and kind of somewhat metaphysical or whatever else than I know you like to get, but it is, I think, practical to what we're trying to argue here, especially we're thinking very long-term time of the human species, sort of intersolar species, however far we make it into space, we're still having this race against time. Each sun will explode eventually, right? So if you think that far into the future, inevitably the entire fucking universe is going, and we're probably going with it. Like, we're never going to infinitely preserve the human experience is what I'm getting at, right?
Absolutely. This is where, it's going to come down to a very metaphysical idea. So have you ever read the story, The Shadow Line? It's a very unknown science fiction book. You ever heard of that one?
I haven't heard of it, no.
And there's a character in there named Gnosis, and Gnosis, or his name is not a coincidence, it actually. So either way, Gnosis made, at the beginning of the story, you know that Gnosis is going to die at the end. It's like a Greek tragedy, right? You know everybody dies. Him and his whole family, save one, are exterminated at the end of the story. And you know that from the beginning. And Gnosis makes a point to his son in the story. His son his son is writing this from perspective, like after all the deaths, the surviving son is, I guess, the perspective of the story. And he recounts something his father tells him, and this has inspired me, I'm not going to lie. He said, it is not our role to question. That life's role is not to survive infinitely, but to fight against the void as long as it possibly can, to fight entropy till it's dead. And that's the way I view it. Like, then that philosophy is very dark. Like, everything I'm doing is fucking pointless. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because here's the little bit of hope here, right? As long as you're alive, there is some degree of hope. Maybe our children, 1,000,000 years from now, or 200 million years from now, when we've evolved far beyond what humanity currently is, right? Maybe they'll find a way to do things like sidestep the heat death of the universe, right? There's so many possibilities. There's mathematically proven dimensions. There's so much possibility out here. So much about physics we don't currently understand. So much energy we have not consumed. There could be answers to those questions. You're in my role right now in 2025 is to do what the people before us did and struggle tooth and nail and eventually give our lives in the hope that our children have a chance to figure those problems out. That's all we can do.
And I agree with you, like almost to the full like leap, but I'm not quite jumping off the cliff of it, right? Because the whole point of bringing up the end of the universe is to say there is something here that humbles us. We know that we can't actually infinitely outrun time and the universe itself. Like, at some point, there is something grander than us that decides our fate, that we actually cannot outrun. And it's good to actually positively believe that we can continue to fight against it. I agree with you, because that's how we continue our civilizations and survive and everything else. But having that little like end of humbling, the knowledge of, we don't know everything, sort of, we're not good, like kind of what we were talking about earlier, the knowledge that like, yeah, we're not good, so we're trying to be good kind of thing. Sorry, there's a lot of threads to tie here, because basically when I'm bringing up the double-edged sword, it reminds me of my dad, who is very much a like MAGA conservative. He's like, we get into it all the time, okay?
Oh God.
And one thing that he always tells me about the 70s and the 80s is the climate change alarmists who told all of the Mormons here in Utah not to have babies because we're going to run out of water, and told them to basically stop populating. This is a crisis of climate, right? And
hello?
Oh, did you lose me? Where'd you lose me?
I lost you for about 5 seconds or 2 seconds. 2 seconds. I heard everything. You're good. It came through.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I basically conceded to him. I was like, look, the climate is changing. It's a problem. I agree with you that this alarmist rhetoric maybe caused us to overreact way too much and people stopped having babies. That's kind of a problem now. In the same way, I think that you're falling trap to the alarmist rhetoric of the birth rates, and I don't think it should sell us out to forcing people to get pregnant. I know you haven't fully gone to like, we have to like
not get pregnant.
Yeah, but your logical, to push you to your logical consistency, you would have to bite that bullet, right? To say if women just stopped having sex.
Allow me to address that. So if I think that the method that I propose could solve a lot of the problem. Also doing some other things, but I don't want to force do breeding camps or anything.
Right.
Obviously, if it got to that extreme and it's the survival of the species versus that, I'm definitely going to pick that. Like that, I'm going to be completely honest with everybody. Survival of the species is top of my end goal. Right. I will sacrifice anybody or anything in order to achieve that. And I think that most people want to live. So I think but yeah, like ideally, that's not where we are. Like, I think that we are at the point where we could still engage in very reasonable encouragement.
Yeah, and I understand. I wasn't, which is why I wasn't like putting that on you. I was just saying that like that kind of is the end result. If it's getting severe enough, like that's where we're going, right?
So I view it like overcorrecting. You ever been in a car? You've seen somebody overcorrect. They see a mistake, they turn, they jerk back and they jerk back the other direction. Like, I view their climate alarmism that you brought up as a severe overcorrection.
Right.
They swerved to miss. They were going to have a birth problem. They were going to have a resource problem. But we solved it with technology, right?
Yeah.
And they swerved to avoid that problem, and they way overcorrected. And now we're in a tailspin. And this isn't like the 70s, where this is pretty hard data from MIT and Harvard with much more advanced technology that at this point we're kind of fucked. Like, it's going to be rough. And like, if it continues, we can only react with the information we have on hand. That's all I'm saying. We can only react with the information we have on hand.
And I understand there's a time element here that we're racing against, but I think my ultimate point to you is I think this abortion thing is inevitably an overcorrection. And I think that because it's gonna make women just react themselves and be like, well, I'm in danger of not being able to take care of my own reproduction, so I'm just not going to have sex. And you see this with Gen Z already, by the way. It's not just that they're not having
sex.
They're not even just not having babies, they're just not having sex. So I think this abortion approach would probably just force more women into this camp of, well, fuck having sex then, I don't want to have a baby. And then now what? The pendulum's going to swing back again to the breeding camps.
This is where I would propose the much more intermediate approach, where while we may force you to carry a pregnancy to term, we would definitely provide for you and the child, and even above and beyond, to include reconstructive surgery. I think that would be less of an overcorrection, because I think it solves a lot of the core problems. Women do want to be in control of their own bodies, and you can't take somebody's freedom without giving them something in return. They just don't like that very well. And the return would be, we will pay you, basically, and believe you off hopefully better than before the pregnancy, in exchange for this alleviation of freedom. And it sucks.
Yeah.
It fucking sucks. I'm aware, like, it is. That's why I don't think it's an overcorrection, because I don't want to throw these people into the wolves.
Right.
But I am a pragmatist, and I think this is something that we've already witnessed. And it's one of those problems, and I think the major problem with this is it's one of those issues that by the time you're like, oh yeah, these people were right, you're dead. Like, either you're dead or society's doing great. Like, right? Like, you don't know, but there's a very solid chance that by the time you're like, oh yeah, those guys were right, the opportunity to make a decision has passed. You know, like, it's one of those hard situations where you have to look at the future and be like, where do I think the future is going to go? Because if you don't make the decision now, the future could be very, very bad, or decent, or very, very bad. And it's like, I don't know, man. It's one of those really bad situations where you just have to make a decision with incomplete information, based on the best projections that you currently have, and hope to God it's not an overcorrection. And I'm not saying I'm right. I think anybody who sat here and tell you I think I'm 100% right on this is fucking lying to you.
Exactly.
Nobody can predict the future accurately.
Well, and
if I'm wrong, shoot me in the fucking head one day. Like, you know what I'm saying?
The thing is, like, this is why I brought up kind of the more metaphysical point of, like, and it really relates to what we talked about earlier with kind of the Taoism thing, the passivity versus the asserting your will onto the earth. At the end of the day, like, there is a fate that we cannot control and will never control. That doesn't mean we just idly sit by and let whatever happen. We should put our will into the world and try to make it better and aim at something that we can achieve. But, like, to me, there's a threshold. And if I'm seeing this threshold and now I'm justifying things like, I don't know, breeding camps, which again, I know you're not doing right now. I just think that
would only be
will
very, very
follow
extreme situations.
Right. Which
if it continues to be this extreme, it would have to. And by the way, people think I'm evil for suggesting that, but I guarantee you, if that event happens, I won't be the only one.
No.
I bow along with
Well,
God.
I genuinely think the fascists right now want that. Just and
They
not
do.
even
They
not
absolutely
even
do.
just
They
for
fucking hate
reproduction. They want it because
they hate
just
women in general.
Yeah, so it's not even just it's like a selfish thing, I think, for them. But
They view women as lesser than, below, and, like, in my opinion, once again, I'll circle back to this: the fascists and the people who think like women belong in the kitchen barefoot and pregnant. Matriarchal societies do not have birth rate problems.
Right.
Like, there's a reason.
Yeah, dude, we need to get you in the arena with one of these guys, because you can just agree with them right off the bat about the birth rate thing and the abortion thing, and then you guys can fight about patriarchy. I would love to see that debate.
Dude, like, I'm not gonna lie, patriarchy works out well for me because in most matriarchal societies, warrior males were generally left to go hunt, fight, and fuck. That's all we had to do: hunt,
Yeah.
fight, fuck, and lead. Like,
Yeah.
lead for like hunting and war, and then we're good. Like, we get to lay back, let the women do the fucking work, raise the kids, play with them to go out. Like, it's great, man. Like, yeah, 30% of the male population dies, but I mean, like, ideally, it's not the worst trade-off, man. But I mean, like, obviously, I don't want that degree of extreme situation in the real and the modern era. But like, come on. Like, compared to like, the feudal
I'm
Europe, it's
gonna
not
have
that
to
bad.
go in like 20 minutes or so, and I really
Me too.
want to get.
I'm technically.
Okay.
I'm off break right now, so I do need to get going.
Okay,
myself.
I really want to like complete this point that I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, go
'cause
ahead.
I-
Oh, I'm so sorry, brother. I'm so sorry. You go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you're good. I think it's a bit complex and it's hard to get out. But basically, when I brought up the universe having its own death that we can't control, right? Ultimately, like, I mean, there is a type of ending that we can't predict and that will probably happen outside of our control no matter how hard we fight it, is what I'm thinking, right? And
possibly.
If that's the case, then to me, that humbles me to the point of, well, we can do as much as we can, but there's a threshold, because at the end of the day, all of this is like, if we all just disappear no matter what, billions of years from now, we're all done no matter what, that limits my threshold of what I'm willing to justify for the sake of preserving the human experience for as long as possible. Now, that doesn't mean I'm concerned about the birth rates. To me, that just means, okay, let's address this in the other types of ways that you're suggesting. If let's overthrow patriarchy, implement a more matriarchal, again, like better communities that operate with the earth better even, right? Like,
yeah.
It's a community problem. It's a consumerism problem. It's a capitalism problem to me. It's not a like giving women the free choice or not problem to me. And otherwise, we're just going to have to ultimately force people to breed, which is just, I think it's a threshold I'm not willing to cross for something that, in terms of infinity, is a blip.
So, I mean, we can end it there, or I could have. It's up to you.
Yeah, have the final word, please.
I think all that's reasonable. I disagree with you, but I don't think any of it's unreasonable. I'll just leave it on. I very fundamentally internalized the concept of never going. And because of this, I'm alive today. I'm alive today because of this. So I'm not going to lie, I have bias. But I'm very much of the opinion, do not go quietly into the dark night, like ever. Fight tooth and nail to the end. That way, if a trillion years from now, or whenever the universe ends, maybe another alien species pops into this universe and they find us and like, well, these motherfuckers went down swinging. Like, even if there's nobody to remember, the universe, it's time being what it is, our story will be there in some way. So I just want to never go quietly. That's my opinion. But I don't see you as unreasonable. I think you're perfectly reasonable.
And I definitely understand your reasoning as well. Do you have to go now, or is there one more? Okay, sounds good. Well,
it was great.
Yeah, we'll be seeing you around the Discord, man.
Dude.
All right, take it easy.
Take care.
All right. Well, that was fun. There was like no direction going in with him. I kind of like wanted to talk about, he has like an honor system and I have a value system, and so I was mostly gonna go there, but then he brought that up. We've always agreed on like the pro-choice thing in the past, and so that was a wrench. That made it fun. I'm glad, because otherwise I don't think we would have got our gloves out. We hardly got our gloves out, but you know, I love respecting people and matching their energy and just having cordial conversation. But man, there's just something about disagreeing that makes it way better. Where we can just like, I don't know what it is, but I'm glad he brought that up because it sort of forced me to actually bring out my gloves a little bit. Anyway, been a fun stream. Hope people out there are safe, and till next time.